The last debate voters will see before the general election. It could change voters' minds in the key battleground states.
So we've got Steve Kornacki over at his post to break down where the race stands right now. Hi, Steve.
Hi, Savannah. And Lester, take a look here. The national poll average first, all the major national polls, we keep a running average. And right now, Kamala Harris at 49%, Trump at 46%, a 3-point lead in the poll average nationally for Kamala Harris right now. Raises the question, this is the third straight election that Donald Trump has been the Republican nominee. How did the race look at this exact same point the last two times? We'll take a look here. 4 years ago, on this date, in the poll average, Joe Biden had a large lead, 9 points over Donald Trump. And, of course, Biden did go on to unseat Donald Trump. But 8 years ago, at this same point, Hillary Clinton had a lead of, does that 3 look familiar? The exact same 3-point lead that Kamala Harris has in the poll average now. And, of course, Hillary Clinton did win the popular vote in 2016, but she lost to Trump where it matters in the Electoral College, in those key swing states. So what do the swing states look like right now? We've been talking about this core group of 7 battlegrounds. And, again, what you're seeing here is our current average of all the polls in those states. And the headline here, obviously, is extremely close. Look, the widest margin you're going to see here is 3 points for Harris in Michigan and in Nevada. Look at North Carolina. You see Harris there leading. I say leading. It's 1/10 of 1 point in the average right now. One thing to keep in mind, we saw big polling misses in the Midwest states in 2016 and 2020. Both elections, they underestimated. The polls did Trump's actual support. Keep that in mind. Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, as we see numbers there this fall. Has that problem been solved? Does it persist? And just for the sake of showing you the state of play right now, this is not a prediction, but if it were to break exactly like this on Election Day, these states were to go exactly as they look right now, let me show you what it would do to the electoral map. So you see we have the battlegrounds in gray. If we fill them in based on the current polling average, this is what you would get. That would give Harris 292. That would be enough for the presidency. But remember, we just showed you North Carolina 1/10 of 1 point. Just by getting that, if Trump could get that, he'd be at 262. He'd be one Midwest state away from the presidency. So that's how close it is when you start to look at those battleground averages right now. Now, in terms of tonight, possible implications for the vote in November in this vice presidential debate, let's take a look at the image of each one of these candidates coming to the stage tonight. Favorable, unfavorable. This is our most recent poll. Tim Walz, 40% positive, 33 negative. He is 7 points above water. J.D. Vance, on the other hand, 32 favorable, 45 unfavorable, 13 points underwater. And perspective on that, if you went back 10 presidential elections, takes us all the way back to 1988. Only one major party vice presidential nominee has been further underwater than J.D. Vance is right now. That was Dan Quayle in 1992 when he was running for re-election with Bush Sr. And, of course, that ticket did go on to lose.
All right.
Okay, this is a big night. Another big night in the American election front. 13 minutes away from the debate. I think they said this is the first and only VP debate and possibly the last debate you will see before the election, period. So it's going to be interesting.
You are motivated. You're Jewish. You're Democrats, both of you registered Democrats, but you're seeing this very differently. Rona, tell me why you're thinking about possibly voting for Donald Trump.
Well, today is not a good day to ask me that, I guess, because today, I mean, I'm really thankful, right? Largest barrage of ballistic missiles ever shot at a country in history. And the U.S. supported Israel and shot down missiles along with Jordan and Israel. And so I'm so incredibly thankful for that. And a big Biden fan today.
Are you still thinking you might vote Republican?
I am still undecided. Yes, absolutely. Because I think every day right now is so utterly critical, and watching how this continues to unfold.
And what about you, Meryl?
And for me, today just verified what I've already felt, that the Biden-Harris administration has been very pro-Israel. Today was really an existential threat for the state of Israel once again. And the United States and the Biden administration, along with Vice President Harris, really stepped up.
So you're definitely voting Harris going into tonight's debate.
Yes.
Let me turn to Claire and Brian. Both of you voted for Trump in 2016, then went away from Trump in 2020, and now you're both considering former President Trump again, even though I think you said you don't really like J.D. Vance very much.
Yeah, I really don't like either of them very much. You know, I'm looking at something different. I want something different. I'm not really sure.
Okay, buddy. I
Where
don't know
we're
about
gonna
that
end
one.
up.
You're gonna go and vote fucking Kamala in? She's just 4 years of the same thing.
I hear something. It
Like, at the end of the day, we've seen 4 years of Trump, and you've seen 4 years of Biden and Kamala. You can decide based off of that.
I mean, I think it's hard to vote for anyone. You know, the keyboard killers, no matter which way. I mean, you vote, you know, in this town democratically, and someone's like, well, you voted for this mayor, and then you see something federally, and they say, well, you voted for that president, no matter which side you're on.
Brandon, you said that your community, which I think is a predominantly black community, is more divided right now, more at odds than you've seen it in an election.
Yeah, so it just seems like there is no real middle ground. Everything is radicalized. Everything is extreme, kind of like what she was saying. Yeah. But more so from my community, being young and African American, it seems like a lot of people are coming to the topic of politics late, and they're missing nuance. So what they're hearing right now is stirring a lot of passion that's bringing them one way or another.
And John, real quick, one word. What do you need to hear tonight?
I guess it's just seeing that Walz is going to support Kamala Harris. I'm pretty much decided
that on Harris.
J.D. Vance and Trump are a danger to our democracy.
Thank you all so much. I'll send it back to you guys, Lester.
All right, Kate, thanks very much. We'll take a break. Next,
what a half-assed answer.
Presidential debate. We'll show it to you live after this. Remember who you're dealing with.
So the rules tonight, each candidate is going to have 2 minutes dealing with. No exceptions all the way up to and including birth. That means a full 9 months. He instituted a hotline during COVID to snitch on your neighbor. That was a big one. He had his police actually paintball people to keep them in their houses. He, what else? Oh, China. No one has spent more time in China than Walz, by the way. He printed out Mao's little red book and gave it out as a gift. This guy, I think Kamala Harris is a byproduct of her environment, San Francisco, right, being indoctrinated in higher education. I know that she grew up in an area of Montreal, very liberal, but she doesn't believe anything. That's why she flipped.
I'm going to be jumping back and forth through a lot of different streams tonight because there's a lot of different news organizations that are going to be running ads. They're going to be running commercials. They're going to be promoting shit that I do not want to be promoting here. They're going to have fucking all of this stuff happening tonight. So I'm going to be jumping between literally everything. So if you're here tonight, you're here along on a ride. I'm very curious to see what happens with this debate.
But if by the end of this debate, the American public, those who have tuned in, do not know the radical nature of Mr. Walz and his wife, I think it's a failure. They should know, and we'll bring up this montage, that this is Tim Walz.
Like I have white guy tacos and
what is that?
black,
like mayonnaise and tuna? What are you doing?
pretty much ground beef and cheese.
That's okay. Do you put any flavor in it?
Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Fry has faced heavy criticism for how he handled the unrest following the death of George Floyd. And as John Crowan reports, the mayor now appears to be shifting some of that blame to Governor Tim Walz.
But we can get out there, reach out, make the case. And for one thing, don't ever shy away from our progressive values. One person's socialism is another person's neighborliness. So this pause is what we're going to ask you to do. It's going to start at this Friday at 11:59, and it's social gatherings with other households. Don't bring other households in. And this is I have a big family. We do a lot of things together. That's not going to be possible.
Let's go! Light him up. Go inside now! Get in the house!
This morning,
I
Governor
remember
Walz
those
signed
clips.
a new executive
I
order
remember
to protect
that.
the rights of Minnesota's LGBTQ+ community to seek and receive gender-affirming health care. Advocates say that this is a huge step forward for our state.
The idea that you said that you were in war. Yeah. Did you misspeak, as the campaign has said?
Yeah, I said we were talking about, in this case, this was after a school shooting, the ideas of carrying these weapons of war. And my wife, the English teacher, told me my grammar is not always correct.
Welcome back. Kamala Harris's running mate, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, has praised China after living and teaching there for a year and visiting China about 30 times.
Now, I happen to be and understand a little about China and lived in China and speak Chinese. I'm pretty friendly with China.
We can't afford
this guy loves China.
4 more years of this.
Minnesota's DFL governor today signed 3 progressive bills into law that boost health.
We can't afford 4 more years of the same government that I'm running for.
And gender care, along with a new conversion therapy ban.
in this case gathered in support of legal protections for people seeking gender-affirming care for themselves or their children. But the paper Governor Walz signed was an executive order.
We have more refugees per capita than any other state. That's not just morally a good thing. It's our economic and cultural future. This beautiful diversity we see out in Worthington when I'm there, you see 50 languages spoken in the school.
And I got to tell you, I can't wait to
50 languages spoken in the school. Holy shit, dude. How can you even back that? Imagine being a teacher and you have to teach and learn 50 different languages. This guy's fucking proud of it. Oh my goodness.
I always like it when I point out that it's a punchline. You know, maybe I could have a silly tie and a spinning little
one of those
flower
hats that has a propeller. Yeah.
I know what you're thinking. Walz is a pussy. And so his wife wears the pants. But here's the thing. His wife, and she's fair game because she's out there speaking publicly. When you think of radical teachers, there are good teachers out there, but teachers who think of your children as mere putty for them to mold and indoctrinate, think of the Walzes. Mr. Walz's wife is just as crazy. She's more crazy than him.
But I kind of liked it when she did this. Turn the page. You like that? Okay, so I need you to
Look at those eyes. Look at those fucking eyes, dude.
turn the page. Oh, pretty good. Do it again. We're gonna turn the
Yeah, the problem is we're
Ready?
adults.
Let's hear it loud and clear like we said. Mr. Trump, Mr. Vance, please mind your own business.
She's like a kindergarten teacher.
I would say those first days, you know, when there were riots, I could smell the burning tires. That was a very real thing. And I kept the windows open for as long as I could because I felt like that was such a touchstone of what was
Yankee Doodle burning tire.
Just listen to my teacher voice, and then we're going to practice it.
Yeah, but we hate your teacher voice.
Here. School has started. Bye-bye, Donald Trump.
This is real.
Oh my
Look
God,
at her
dude.
face.
We are turning the page.
She's like Skeletor.
Whoa. Whoa.
Days, and we are turning the page.
That's gotta be math.
Bye-bye, Donald Trump.
That is important to show because if he ever gets close to the Oval Office, it's going to be a bad time for white women. Because that woman is going to be seen as volunteering for you as tribute. Like, do you see her face? You ever seen someone with crazy eyes? I've known 3 people in my life with crazy eyes. Yes. 3 people in my life, and I could name them, and I could tell you when I saw they had crazy eyes. Comment below. You know someone with crazy eyes?
Do it, dude.
Like, you know someone with really dumb eyes where the lights aren't on? You know someone with crazy eyes where it's like, oh, this person has a skin suit in their closet? Her face is becoming twisted from her craziness. She's sitting there, she's like, okay, go with, she just can't help herself, and go with me!
It's like a James Wan movie.
I'm your teacher!
She seems like
All right. The debate is starting in about 2 minutes. We'll be switching back and forth depending on how long these commercial breaks are.
Knows one of these 2 men could become president of the United States. The country is going to take a temperature on character, on policy. Who are these people who might lead the country? And one of them might be leading the country should a crisis happen, a heartbeat away from the presidency. We live in a time of assassination attempts on the Republican nominee, of political violence, and of aging politicians. So it's no question that one day one of these people could be president. We hope all people live healthy lives and serve full terms, but you never know in American history. That's what the history always tells us.
Nancy, other big event is these incredible floods in North Carolina, which also is a platform for presidents.
It is, because handling of natural disasters is often a proxy for voters of competence. They look at how you handle something like that and they say this person is capable of handling big, important things. And that's why President Biden tomorrow is heading to North Carolina and South Carolina and Florida and Georgia the next day.
And here we see the vice presidential candidates there. Tim Walz standing a lone man behind his lectern. Ed, give us your last thoughts as we watch here as J.D. Vance is off in the wings for the moment. Oh, there he is.
It's performance. That seems obvious, but no faux pas.
and they're looking for a viral moment.
All right, here we go. A minute away. I believe they're going to start very soon.
And there you have Governor Walz appears to be taking some notes. J.D. Vance doing the same as our colleagues.
And they were shaking hands before the cameras came.
That's right.
Oh, okay.
Well, we have the vice presidential.
Okay, nobody wants to see you guys. Go back to the fucking.
Nora O'Donnell and Margaret Brennan. Ohio Senator J.D. Vance and Minnesota Governor.
The embassy to Jerusalem. All of those things happened, and yet the Middle East was not on fire. Right now, it is on fire, absolutely.
Well, that's a good the contrast here. Let's show, actually, it's the clip Biden-Israel. Biden's response to the conflict going on with Israel, Hezbollah, Iran right now. Again, the contrast is important. Biden and then Trump, and then we'll get to the debate.
At my direction, the United States military actively supported the defense of Israel, and we're still assessing the impact. But based on what we know now, the attack appears to have been defeated and ineffective. And this is testament to Israeli military capability and U.S. military. It's also a testament to intensive planning between the United States and Israel to anticipate and defend against the.
Who could forget the plan?
The planning, aka just dumping as much money into there as possible.
Fully supportive of Israel. And I've been spent the morning and part of the afternoon in the Situation Room.
You know what's interesting is, you know what they used for the defense? Yeah, the thing that you basically raked Reagan over the coals for back in the 80s, right? Star Wars. They used a version of that with the Iron Dome.
Well, let's contrast that with Donald Trump. He issued his press release on Truth Social or statement. When I was president, Iran was in total check.
And we are ready to continue to build the future together.
We're to turn this whole country red with President Donald J. Trump's leadership.
You know what's at the end of this little journey? Kamala Harris as the next president of the United States.
This is a CBS News special, live from CBS News headquarters in New York. America Decides.
What's up, Sean?
The
How's it going?
Vice Presidential Debate.
Good evening, I'm Nora O'Donnell, and thank you for joining us for tonight's CBS News Vice Presidential Debate. We want to welcome our viewers on CBS, on other networks here in the U.S. and around the world. We have a consequential night ahead, and our focus is the issues that matter to you, the voter. Let's introduce the candidates. Minnesota's Democratic Governor Tim Walz and Ohio's Republican Senator J.D. Vance, tonight meeting for the first time.
I'm Margaret Brennan. In order to have a thoughtful and civil debate, these are the rules that both campaigns have agreed to. Questions will be directed at one candidate, who will have 2 minutes to respond. The other candidate will be allowed 2 minutes for rebuttal. Then each candidate will get another minute to make further points, with an additional 1 minute each at the discretion of the moderator. The primary role of the moderators is to facilitate the debate between the candidates, enforce the rules, and provide the candidates with the opportunity to fact-check claims made by each other.
CBS News reserves the right to mute the candidates' microphones to maintain decorum.
Oh, yeah, of course. So, yeah, if things get out of hand, they don't want anybody to speak. Oh, heaven forbid anybody speaks or says what they want.
Let's get started. Tonight, our country is facing several unfolding crises. The Middle East is on the brink of war. Americans are suffering from the catastrophic impact of Hurricane Helene. And now a labor strike as 25,000 dock workers from Maine to Texas are picketing. We're going to begin tonight with the Middle East. Margaret.
Thank you, Nora. Earlier today, Iran launched its largest attack yet on Israel, but that attack failed, thanks to joint U.S. and Israeli defensive action. President Biden has deployed more than 40,000
I think they're supposed to go to camera 2.
These are the rules that both campaigns have agreed to. Questions will be directed at one candidate, who will have 2 minutes to respond. The other candidate will be allowed 2 minutes for rebuttal.
You guys are here right now. Should we watch with or without Steven Crowder? Let me know.
Pink. I guarantee it. I don't know why.
At the discretion of the moderator. The primary role of the moderators is to facilitate the debate between the candidates, enforce the rules, and provide the candidates with the opportunity to fact-check.
They're going to be on their best behavior because of what happened with ABC. They're going to. They really have to be skilled in hiding their bias, but we know they have it.
Decorum. We have not shared the questions or topics with the campaigns.
And no one, I repeat, no one will have Bluetooth earrings.
Let's get started. Tonight, our country is
Tim's
facing
always worn
several
earrings. What are you
unfolding
talking about?
crises. The Middle East is on the brink of war.
It's date night with a
Americans
horse.
are suffering
First
from
question.
the catastrophic impact of Hurricane Helene, and now a labor strike as 25,000 dock workers.
That hurricane was pretty brutal. Category 4 did a lot of damage.
The Middle East.
Margaret. Thank you, Nora. Earlier today, Iran launched its largest attack yet on Israel, but that attack failed, thanks to joint U.S. and Israeli defensive action. President Biden has deployed more than 40,000 U.S. military personnel and assets to that region over the past year to try to prevent a regional war. Iran is weakened, but the U.S. still considers it the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world, and it has drastically reduced the time it would take to develop a nuclear weapon. It is down now to 1 or 2 weeks' time. Governor Walz, if you were the final voice in the Situation Room, would you support or oppose a preemptive
Tough one for him off the bat.
by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you. And thank you for those joining at home tonight. Let's keep in mind where this started. October 7th, Hamas terrorists massacred over 1,400 Israelis and took prisoners. Israel's ability to be able to defend itself is absolutely fundamental. Getting its hostages back, fundamental, and ending the humanitarian
That's the sound of
crisis
them losing
in
Hamtramck, Dearborn, and a lot of
Gaza.
Minnesota.
But the expansion of Israel and its proxies is an absolute fundamental necessity for the United States to have the steady leadership there. You saw it experienced today, where along with our Israeli partners and our coalition, able to stop the incoming attack. But what's fundamental here is that steady leadership is going to matter. It's clear, and the world saw it on that debate
Add to the
stage
drinking
a few
game.
weeks ago.
Anytime he uses fundamental, that's his word whisker when he's nervous.
Talking about crowd sizes is not what we need in this moment. But it's not just that. It's those that were closest to Donald Trump that understand how dangerous he is when the world is this dangerous. His chief of staff, John Kelly,
This is a
said
layup
that he was
for
the most
Vance.
flawed
He's
human
going to
being ever
contrast
met.
Obama,
And both of
Biden,
his
Harris with
secretaries
Iran
of defense
unfreezing $10 billion in
and
funds, the
his national
1.7
security
trillion.
advisors
What?
said he should be nowhere
6 billion
near
funds?
the
I thought he
White House. Now, the person closest to them,
No, allowed them access to $10 billion in funds in 2023.
Donald Trump, said he's unfit for the highest office. That was Senator Vance. What we've seen out of Vice President Harris is we've seen steady leadership. We've seen a calmness
Also, pea
that is
soup
able
projectiles
to be able
across
to
the room.
draw on the coalitions to bring them together. Understanding that our allies matter. When our allies
You see Vance's face, he
Donald
knows he's got
Trump
it.
turn towards Vladimir Putin, turn towards North Korea, when we start to see that type of fickleness around holding the coalitions together, we will stay committed. And as the Vice
You mean your
President
coalition
said
with
today
Iran?
is, we will protect
There's never
our
been a greater
forces and our
coalition with
allied
terror
forces, and
than the
there will be
Obama/Biden extension with Iran. It's not even close.
Governor, your time is up. Senator Vance, the same question.
Did he
Would you
directly
support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on
to this vice presidential debate? I want to answer the question, but I want to actually give an introduction to myself a little bit because I recognize a lot of Americans don't know who either one of us are. I was raised in a working class family. My mother required food assistance for periods of her life. My grandmother required Social Security help to raise me, and she raised me in part because my own mother struggled with addiction.
He's going to
for a
get
big
right
chunk
into it,
of
though.
my early life. I went to college on the GI Bill after I enlisted in the Marine Corps and served in Iraq.
He's
And so I
doing this
stand
because he
here
knows that Walz is going to try and say he went to Yale. He's cutting him off. He's going to go to a direct answer. I bet my life on it. Watch. He's going to get specific on Iran. He's cutting Walz off the knees. This is smart.
Worried about the chaos in the world and the feeling that the American dream is unattainable. I want to try to convince you tonight over the next 90 minutes that if we get better leadership in the White House, if we get Donald Trump back in the White House, the American dream is going to be attainable once again. Now, to answer this particular question, we have to remember that as much as Governor Walz just accused Donald Trump of being an agent of chaos, Donald Trump actually delivered stability in the world, and he did it by establishing effective deterrence. People were afraid of stepping out of line. Iran, which launched this attack, has received over $100 billion in unfrozen assets thanks to the Kamala Harris administration. What do they use that money for? They use it to buy weapons that they're now launching against our allies, and God forbid, potentially launching against against the United States as well. Donald Trump recognized that for people to fear the United States, you needed peace through strength. They needed to recognize that if they got out of line, the United States global leadership would put stability and peace back in the world. Now, you asked about a preemptive strike, Margaret, and I want to answer the question. Look, it is up to Israel what they think they need to do to keep their country safe, and we should support our allies wherever they are when they're fighting the bad guys. I think that's the right approach to take with the Israel question.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Walz, do you care to respond to any of the allegations?
Well, look, Donald Trump was in office. We'll sometimes hear a revisionist history, but when Donald Trump was in office, it was Donald Trump who we had a coalition of nations that had boxed Iran's nuclear program in, the inability to advance it. Donald Trump pulled that program and put nothing else in its place. So Iran is closer to a nuclear
According to
weapon
Al
than they were
Jazeera,
before
Donald Trump's
because of
sanctions
Donald
cost
Trump's
Iran
fickle
$1 trillion.
leadership.
Bring it up.
Iran
Fact check
shot
false,
down
Tim.
an American aircraft in international.
And this is why we watch Steven Crowder. He's got the fact checks ready to go.
Trump. And when Iranian missiles did fall near U.S. troops and they received traumatic brain injuries, Donald Trump wrote it off as headaches. Look, our allies understand that Donald Trump is fickle. He will go to whoever has the most flattery or where it makes sense to him. Steady leadership like you witnessed today, like you witnessed in April. Both Iranian attacks were repelled. Our coalition is strong, and we need the steady leadership that Kamala Harris is providing.
Senator Vance,
but it's happening right now under her leadership.
Deal
right now.
With Iran to temporarily pause parts of its nuclear program, and President Trump did exit that deal. He recently said, just 5 days ago, the U.S. must now make a diplomatic deal with Iran because the consequences are impossible.
Does that affect you?
Did he make a mistake? You have 1 minute.
Well, first of all, Margaret, diplomacy is not a dirty word, but I think that's something that Governor Walz just said is quite extraordinary. You yourself just said Iran is as close to a nuclear weapon today as they have ever been. And Governor Walz, you blame Donald Trump. Who has been the vice president for the last 3.5 years? And the answer is your running mate, not mine. Donald Trump consistently made the world more secure. Now, we talk about the sequence of events that led us to where we are right now, and you can't ignore October the 7th, which I appreciate Governor Walz bringing up. But when did Iran and Hamas and their proxies attack Israel? It was during the administration of Kamala Harris. So Governor Walz can criticize Donald Trump's tweets, but effective, smart diplomacy and peace through strength is how you bring stability back to a very broken world. Donald Trump has already done it once before. Ask yourself at home, when was the last time, I'm 40 years old, when was the last time that an American president didn't have a major conflict break out? The only answer is during the 4 years that Donald Trump was president.
Drink, beast mode, JD Vance, beast mode.
Nora?
Margaret, thank you. Let's turn now to Hurricane
Thank you.
Helene.
This is not going as expected. Bring up the drinking game rules one more
deadliest
time. You can play along with us.
More than 160 people are dead and hundreds more are missing. Scientists say climate change makes these hurricanes larger, stronger.
Walz is going to answer, include climate change. JD Vance is going to put it on poor leadership.
According to CBS
That's how this is going to go.
polling, 7 in 10 Americans and more than 60% of Republicans under the age of 45 favor the U.S. taking steps to try and reduce climate change. Senator, what responsibility
it's about climate change? That's the question.
Will the Trump administration have to try and
That's a gang up drink. That's a bias by gang up.
Of climate change? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Sure. So first of all, let's start with the hurricane because it's an unbelievable, unspeakable human tragedy. I just saw today actually a photograph of 2 grandparents on a roof with a 6-year-old child, and it was the last photograph ever taken of them because the roof collapsed and those innocent people lost their lives. And I'm sure Governor Walz joins me in saying our hearts go out to those innocent people, our prayers go out to them, and we want as robust and aggressive as a federal response as we can get to save as many lives as possible, and then of course afterwards to help the people in those communities rebuild. I mean, these are communities that I love. Some of them I know very personally in Appalachia, all across the Southeast. They need their government to do their job, and I commit that when Donald Trump is president again, the government will put the citizens of this country first when they suffer from a disaster. Now, Nora, you asked about climate change. I think this is a very important issue. Look, a lot of people are justifiably worried about all these crazy weather patterns. I think it's important for us, first of all, to say Donald Trump and I support clean air, clean water. We want the environment to be cleaner and safer. But one of the things that I've noticed some of our Democratic friends talking a lot about is a concern about carbon emissions, this idea that carbon emissions drives all of the climate change. Well, let's just say that's true, just for the sake of argument, so we're not arguing about weird science. Let's just say that's true. Well, if you believe that, what would you want to do? The answer is that you'd want to reshore as much American manufacturing as possible, and you'd want to produce as much energy as possible in the United States of America, because we're the cleanest economy in the entire world. What have Kamala Harris's policies actually led to? More energy production in China, more manufacturing overseas, more doing business in some of the dirtiest parts of the entire world. And when I say that, I mean the amount of carbon emissions they're doing per unit of economic output.
He's trying to drag Walz to China because he knows that Walz is like this with China.
The best thing to do is to
he may be the best debater we've seen
workers
in the last 2 decades.
And unfortunately, Kamala Harris has done exactly the opposite.
Governor Walz.
Look at the joy in his face.
That was a pretty smart move.
Happening. Look, first of all, it is a horrific tragedy with this hurricane, and my heart goes out to the folks that
when he
are down
panics,
there,
he gets pinker.
In contact with the
Yeah,
governors. I serve as
he's nervous
co-chair of the Council of Governors as we work together on these
Vance,
emergency
what we gonna do tomorrow night?
No partisanship. They work together so all of the governors and the emergency responders are on the ground. Those happen on the front end. The federal government comes in, makes sure they're there that we recover, but we're still in that phase where
Unless
we need
it's
to make
Maui
sure
or East
that they're
Palestine.
staying there, staying focused. Now, look, coming
Happened
back
on your
to
watch,
the climate
Kamala.
change issue, there's no doubt this
I told you
thing
he's going to
roared
climate.
onto
He
the
has to go to
scene
climate change.
faster and stronger than anything
What did I
we've
tell you?
seen.
Vance is going to go to leadership.
Senator Vance
He's
has
going to go to
said
climate
there's
change.
a
Vance
climate
did it in a
problem.
roundabout way that was
Donald
even
Trump
more
called
clever
it
than I thought.
hoax. And then
This is all he
joked
has.
that these things would make more beachfront property to be able to invest in.
Wrong.
What we've seen out of the Harris administration now, the Biden-Harris administration, is we've seen this investment. We've seen massive investments, the biggest in global history that we've seen in the Inflation Reduction Act, has created jobs all across the country. 2,000 in Jeffersonville, Ohio, taking the EV technology that we invented and making it here. 200,000 jobs across the country. The largest solar manufacturing plant in North America sits in Minnesota. But my farmers know climate change is real. They've seen 500-year droughts, 500-year floods back to back. But what they're doing is adapting, and this has allowed them to tell me,
American public,
look, I harvest
people
corn, I harvest soybeans,
in Carolina right now,
we're producing more natural gas and more
guess
oil
how you know they
than
don't care
I
about
ever
you?
have. We're also producing more clean
They're talking about electric vehicles.
So
when you're fighting for your life.
For us is to continue to move forward, that climate change is real. Reducing our impact is absolutely critical, but this is not a false choice. You can do that at the same time you're creating the jobs that we're seeing all across the country. That's exactly what this administration has done. We are seeing us becoming an energy superpower for the future, not just the current. And that's what absolutely makes sense. And then we start thinking
That's
about
not true. The direct, by the way,
how
mission
do we
control, the direct
mitigate
push to
these
EVs
disasters.
has emboldened China. They create more
Senator,
EVs. I
I
believe they're
wanna give you
number
an
2 in the world
opportunity to
outside of
respond there.
Tesla,
The
like
governor
number 2
mentioned
through
that
7.
President
People
Trump
don't
has
realize
called
that here.
climate change a hoax.
Not to
Do you
mention the
agree?
mining for the batteries.
Look, what the president has said is that if the Democrats, in particular Kamala Harris and her leadership, if they really believe that climate change is serious, what they would be doing is more manufacturing and more energy production in the United States of America, and that's not what they're doing. So clearly Kamala Harris herself doesn't believe her own rhetoric on this. If she did, she would actually agree with Donald Trump's energy policies. Now, something Governor Walz said I think is important to touch upon, because when we talk about clean energy, I think that's a slogan that often the Democrats will use here. And I'm talking, of course, about the Democratic leadership. And the real issue is that if you're spending hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars of American taxpayer money on solar panels that are made in China, number one, you're going to make the economy dirtier. We should be making more of those solar panels here in the United States of America. Some of them are, Tim, but a lot of them are being made overseas in China, especially the components that go into those solar panels. So if you really want to make the environment cleaner,
not just that, but you got to think of all of the mining equipment and construction equipment and the trucks that will drive all of the materials around, everything that it takes to build electric vehicles. It doesn't equal out to actually saving the climate. It just doesn't.
More natural gas. Come on, man. There's no moratorium on that. We're producing more oil, but the folks know. And like I said again, these are not liberal folks. These are not folks that are Green New Deal folks. These are farmers that have been drought one year, massive flooding the next year. They understand that it makes sense. Look, our #1 export cannot be topsoil from erosion from these massive storms. We saw it in Minnesota this summer. And
that's a line
thinking
he
about
practiced.
How do we respond to that? We're thinking ahead on this. And what Kamala Harris has been able to do
So to
in
those
Minnesota,
affected by the hurricane,
we're starting to weather-proof
don't
some of
worry.
these things.
There are more
The
electric
infrastructure
Chinese
law that was passed
vehicles
allows us
coming
to
your way.
think about
That'll fix the next one.
Yeah. By the way, BYD number 1 by a long shot, more than Tesla.
BYD number 1, Tesla number 2. There you go.
And more of. But to call it a hoax and to take the oil company executives to Mar-a-Lago, say, give me money for my campaign, and I'll let you do whatever you want. We can be smarter about that, and an all-above energy policy is exactly what she's doing, creating those jobs right here.
Governor, your time is up. The overwhelming consensus among scientists is that the Earth's climate is warming at an unprecedented rate.
We won't fact check.
Thank you, Nora.
Drink, gang up
We're
for the
gonna turn
moderators.
now to
They put in a
immigration.
last
The
word
crisis at
to
the
try and save
US-Mexico
Walz. Did you see
border
that?
Consistently ranks as one of the top issue for American voters.
Immigration.
Senator
Whenever
Vance,
we do,
your campaign is pledging.
whenever we see these debates over in America, it's always a 3v1. The commentators always end up trying to save face for the liberals. It's just fucking hilarious.
illegally and separate them from
Watch,
any
he's
of
going to
their
include.
children
Let's start
who
with the
were
criminals who
born
are here
on
who've been
US
apprehended.
soil.
Let's deport them
You have
first.
2
He's going to do
minutes.
that. Watch.
So first of all, Margaret, before we talk about deportations, we have to stop the bleeding. We have a historic immigration crisis because Kamala Harris started and said that she wanted to undo all of Donald Trump's border policies. 94 executive orders suspending deportations, decriminalizing illegal aliens, massively increasing the asylum fraud that exists in our system. That has opened the floodgates. And what it's meant is that a lot of fentanyl is coming into our country. I had a mother who struggled with opioid addiction and has gotten clean. I don't want people who are struggling with addiction to be deprived of their second chance because Kamala Harris let in fentanyl into our communities at record levels. So you've got to stop the bleeding. You've got to re-implement Donald Trump's border policies, build the wall, re-implement deportations. And that gets me to your point, Margaret, about what do we actually do? So we've got 25 million illegal aliens who are here in the country. What do we do with them? I think the first thing that we do is we start with the criminal migrants. About 1 million of those people have committed some form of crime in addition to crossing the border illegally. I think you start with deportations
like he's reading my notes.
on those folks.
We did
and then
send
I
them
think
to him.
you make it harder for illegal aliens to undercut the wages of American workers. A lot of people will go home if they can't work for less than minimum wage in our own country. And by the way, that'll be really good for our workers who just want to earn a fair wage for doing a good day's work. And the final point, Margaret, is you ask about family separation. Right now in this country, Margaret, we have 320,000 children that the Department of Homeland Security has effectively lost. Some of them have been sex trafficked. Some of them hopefully are at homes with their families. Some of them have been used as drug trafficking mules. The real family separation policy in this country is unfortunately Kamala Harris's wide open southern border. And I'd ask my fellow Americans to remember when she came into office, she said she was going to do this. Real leadership would be saying, you know what, I screwed up. We're going to go back to Donald Trump's border policies. I wish that she would do that. It would
Mission
be good
Control,
for
give me the
all
border
of us.
crossings, month to month.
Governor,
Trump versus Harris. I don't have the exact ones ready.
Specific allegations, including that the vice president is, quote, letting in fentanyl and using kids as
moderators
drug
ganging
mules,
up on
among
Vance.
other
Drink.
things.
That's a finish your drink.
The drug mule is not true. But I will say about this, about the fentanyl, because this is a crisis of this.
Did you say the
opioid
drug mule is not
crisis. And
true?
The good news on this is the last 12 months saw the largest
Holy
decrease
shit,
in
tell it to a
opioid
Border
deaths
Patrol
in our
agent.
nation's history. 30% decrease in Ohio, but there's still more work to do. But let's go back to this on immigration. Kamala Harris was the Attorney General of the largest state and a border state in California. She's the only person in this race who prosecuted transnational gangs for human trafficking and drug interventions. But look, we all want to solve this.
What are the results? You're just saying,
Most of us want
she
to
was a
solve
lawyer.
this.
She did prosecution.
And that
I
is
mean,
the United
she failed
States
all of them.
Congress. That's the Border Patrol agents. That's the Chamber of Commerce. That's most Americans out here. That's why we had the fairest and the toughest bill on immigration.
No, you didn't. No, you didn't. It was $20 billion for immigration, $70 billion for Ukraine.
From Oklahoma,
Nothing for a wall.
James Lankford. I know him. He's super conservative, but he's a man of principle. Wants to get it done. Democrats and Republicans worked on this piece of legislation. The Border Patrol said this is what we need in here. These are the experts. And the Chamber of Commerce and the Wall Street Journal said pass this thing. Kamala Harris helped get there. 1,500 new border agents. Detection for drugs.
You just said drug mules weren't a thing.
Speed up.
5,000 people a day.
The adjudications on this.
5,000 people a day.
Wants. But as soon as I was getting
11 million just to the southern border. Last time I checked, it's
Donald
12.
Trump said no.
Just under the Harris-Biden administration, if you actually include all illegal immigration, it's close to 20 million.
What would Donald Trump talk about if we actually did some of these things? And they need to be
just
done.
Just undo your undoing through executive orders.
Just do this through the executive branch. So look, we have the options to do this. Donald Trump had 4 years. He had 4 years to do this. And he
do we have the
promised
comparison
you, America,
of Trump versus
how easy it would be.
Trump had 3 million total, 18 million Kamala Harris.
There you go.
Less than 2% of that wall got built, and Mexico didn't pay a dime. But here we are again, 9
But you
years
said
after
a
he
wall
came down
was
that
racist.
escalator, dehumanizing people and telling him what he was going to do. As far as the deportation plan, at one point,
you guys notice
Senator
Walz
Vance
still has
said
talking
it was so
points from
unworkable it would be
2016.
laughable.
He doesn't real. No, I mean this. He doesn't realize that the American people believe that we need to close our borders and deport. That's an overwhelmingly popular opinion.
Was, will you separate parents from their children, even if their
Whoa.
kids are U.S. citizens?
He doesn't get to respond. Do you want to hit him back with a parent thing?
We already have massive child separations thanks to Kamala Harris's open border. And I didn't accuse Kamala Harris of inviting drug mules. I said that she enabled the Mexican drug cartels to operate freely in this country, and we know that they use children as drug mules. And it is a disgrace.
He doesn't know he's in split screen.
To stop. Look, I think what Tim said just doesn't pass.
Did he just nod in agreement?
He did. 3 years. Kamala Harris went out.
Guys, clip that so we have it ready to poll.
Donald Trump's border policy. She did exactly that. We had a record number of illegal crossings. We had a record number of fentanyl coming into our.
Walz is cooked. He just doesn't know what to do. Walz does not know what to do.
She says that somehow she got religion.
He's looking at Vance like he's learning new information he's never heard before.
And you've seen me say when Donald Trump didn't beat Biden that second debate, you've seen me say with the Kamala Harris debate didn't go so well. This is a walk-off thus far.
Actions that opened the border. This problem is leading to massive problems in the United States of America. Parents who can't afford health care, schools that are overwhelmed. It's got to stop, and it will when Donald Trump is president.
He's too fluid. He's too good on his feet.
Your time is up, Governor.
They did try to gang up on him.
Our CBS News
is Walz
polling,
crying?
which does show that a majority of Americans, more than 50%, support mass deportations.
Look, we fix this issue with a bill that is necessary, but the issue on this is what happens when you don't want to solve it. You demonize it. And we saw this. And like Senator Vance, and it surprises me on this, talking about and saying, I will create stories to bring attention to this. That vilified a large number of people.
He wants to go to Haiti
in the community,
and then accuse Vance of bringing up stories.
The governor said it's not true. Don't do it. There's consequences for this. There's consequences. We could
no. The Ohio governor said that every single bomb threat, I believe it was 33, all 33 were hoaxes from foreign entities.
Make it an issue.
Every single one. Let's bring up the fact check on that.
Springfield were the governor had to send state law enforcement to escort kindergartners to school. I believe Senator Vance wants to solve this, but by standing with Donald Trump and not working together to find a solution, it becomes a talking point.
3 million to 18 million, dummy.
Talking point like this.
3 million crossing to 18 million, dummy. Answer.
Other human beings.
Tim,
Governor, your time is up. Senator, I'll give you 1 minute, but let me just ask you the question first.
No.
The governor has made the point, and I think as a sitting lawmaker, you know that Congress controls the purse strings and any funding. So you have said repeatedly
she's reiterating
that
a Tim Walz point. Finish your drink. I need a refill.
Me
too.
Refills. This. Do you disagree that Congress controls the purse strings and would need to support many of the changes that you would actually
93
want
executive
implement?
actions.
You have 1 minute.
Look, Margaret, first of all, the gross majority of what we need to do at the southern border is just empowering law enforcement to do their job. I've been to the southern border more than our borders are. Kamala Harris has been. And it's actually heartbreaking because the Border Patrol agents, they just want to be empowered to do their job. Of course, additional resources would help, but most of this is about the
write that one down, Tim? You want to write that one down as well? You're going to let people do their jobs? Oh, yeah, there he goes.
Got to stay in Mexico. You've got to go back through proper channels. Now, Governor Walz brought up the community of Springfield, and he's very worried about the things that I've said in Springfield. Look, in Springfield, Ohio, and in communities all across this country, you've got schools that are overwhelmed. You've got hospitals that are overwhelmed. You've got housing that is totally unaffordable because we brought in millions of illegal immigrants to compete with Americans for scarce homes. The people that I'm most worried about in Springfield, Ohio, are the American citizens who have had their lives destroyed by Kamala Harris's open border. It is a disgrace to him.
You're witnessing the future presidential candidate win, lose, or draw this election. DeSantis is going to have his hands full if he has to primary this guy.
You have 1 minute to respond.
Yeah, well, It is law enforcement that asked for the bill.
His base is
they
not
helped
good.
craft it.
No,
They're
they
the ones
asked
that
for a
supported
bill.
Then
you tacked on $70 billion for Ukraine, or $60 billion. You can let me know. I don't remember the final number.
Of not dealing
$60
with
billion
it.
in Ukraine, 14.1 for Israel,
everything.
and like
On
$7
housing,
billion
we
for
could
some
talk
other
a little
conflicts
bit
around the
about
world.
Wall Street speculators buying up housing and making them less affordable. But it becomes a blame. Look, this bill also gives the money necessary to adjudicate. I agree. It should not take 7 years for an asylum claim to be done. This bill gets it done in 90 days. Then you start to make a difference in this, and you start to adhere to what we know, American principles.
No wall.
I don't talk about my faith a lot, but Matthew 25:40 talks about, to the least amongst us you do unto me. I think that's true of most Americans. They simply want order to it. This bill does it. It's funded. It's supported by the people who do it, and it lets us keep our dignity about how we treat other people.
It was a
Thank you,
horrific bill.
Governor.
We
And
broke
just
it down.
to clarify
Go check the
for
video
our
out.
viewers, Springfield, Ohio does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status, temporary protected
Hold on.
status.
That's
Thank you,
you.
Senator. We have
Hold on.
so much to get to.
No. You don't get to get the last word.
Wow, they're just cutting them off. They just get to say some shit and leave.
Too much.
Say some shit and move on.
I think it's important to say what's actually going on. So there's an application called the CBP
Take
One
over
app,
the shit.
where you can go on as an illegal migrant, apply for asylum or apply for parole, and be granted legal status at the wave of a Kamala
Look at
Harris
his face!
open border
He's like,
wall.
oh, shit.
That is not a person coming in, applying for a green card and waiting for 10 years. That
Thank
is
you,
the
Senator.
facilitation of illegal immigration, Margaret, by
Thank
our
you,
own
Senator, for
leadership.
describing the
There you
legal
go.
process.
Kamala-
We have so much to
Thank you for describing the legal process.
So much.
CBS is just as bad as ABC tonight. That's the one thing I was wrong about.
They're all bad. Every single news organization like that is bad. It should not be shocking.
I hear you because your mics are cut. We have so much we want to get to.
Wish we could
Thank
do
you
the same for your
explaining the
lapel
legal
mic.
process.
We have to throw our little jabs in and
Thank
then
you,
move
Margaret.
on. So,
The economy
yeah.
is a top concern for voters.
She wants to oust
Each
Miss
of your
Pink, so she's acting
campaigns
professional.
has released
There you
an
go.
economic plan. So let's talk about the specifics. Governor Walz, Vice President Harris unveiled a plan that includes billions in tax credits for manufacturing,
And his love of
housing,
horses.
and a renewed child tax credit. The Wharton School says your proposals will increase the nation's deficit by $1.2 trillion.
By the way, that's the school
How
Kamala
would you
Harris
pay for
referenced
that
as though they
without
supported her.
ballooning
Yes.
the deficit? Governor, I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well,
thank you.
shoot.
And
Fair
Kamala
question.
Harris and I do believe in the middle class because that's where we come from. We both grew up in that. We understand. So those of you out there
Rick.
listening tonight,
Exactly
you're
that.
hearing a lot of stuff back and forth, and it's good. It's healthy. That's what this is supposed to happen. You should be listening. How's this going to impact me? The bold forward plan that Kamala Harris put out there is talking about this housing issue. The one thing is there's 3 million new houses proposed under this plan with down payment assistance
you like
on the front
Section
end
8.
to get you in a house. A house is much more than just an asset to be traded
Here's the good
somewhere.
neighborhoods.
It's foundational to where you're at. And then making sure that the things you buy every day,
It's where
whether
you
they
are,
be
grammar
prescription
Nazi.
drugs or other things, that there's fairness in that. Look, the $35 insulin is a good thing, but it costs $5 to make insulin. They were charging $800 before this law went into effect. As
Bring up
far
the
as
fact check,
housing
Donald Trump,
goes,
the insulin
I see
cap.
it in Minnesota, 12%
Donald
more
Trump was the
housing
one
in
who started it. They
Minneapolis,
claim
prices
credit
went
for
down
it.
on
They
rent.
expanded
So
it, that was it.
it's working. And then making sure tax cuts go to the middle class. $6,000 child tax credit, we have one in Minnesota, reduces childhood poverty by 1/3. We save money in the long run, and we do the right thing for families. And then getting businesses off the ground. The law as it stands right now is $5,000 tax credit for small business, increasing that to $50,000.
1,500 businesses closed down, never returned because of his policy during COVID.
10,500. And I'll give you this.
10,500. I'm sorry.
He took
Fact check me.
folks
Good for
from
you.
Mar-a-Lago, said, "You're rich as
Good
hell,
for
and
you.
give a tax cut." He gave the tax cuts that predominantly went to the top class. What happened there was an $8 trillion increase in the national debt, the largest ever. Now he's proposing a 20% consumption or sales tax
Fact
on
check
everything
that.
we bring
False.
in. Everyone agrees, including businesses, it would be destabilizing it, it would increase inflation and potentially lead to a recession. Look, this is simple for you. Where are we going? Kamala Harris has said to do the things she wants to do. We'll just ask the wealthiest to pay their fair share.
Define
when you
it.
do that,
You didn't
our
say
system
ask.
works best. More
Force.
people are participating in it, and folks have the things that they need.
Senator, I want to give you a moment to respond on that. But
Vance
similarly,
is like,
the Wharton
"I've got this,
School
Miss
has done
Pink."
an analysis of the Trump plan and says it would increase the nation's deficit by $5.8 trillion. My question is the same for you. How do you pay for all that without ballooning the deficit? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, you're going to hear a lot from Tim Walz this evening, and you just heard it in the answer. A lot of what Kamala Harris proposes to do, and some of it, I'll be honest with you, it even sounds pretty good. Here's what you won't hear, is that Kamala Harris has already done it. Because she's been the vice president for 3.5 years. She had the opportunity to enact all of these great policies, and what she's actually done instead is drive the cost of food higher by 25%, drive the cost of housing higher by about 60%, open the American southern border, and make middle-class life unaffordable for a large number of Americans. If Kamala Harris has such great plans for how to address middle-class problems, then she ought to do them now. Not when asking for a promotion, but in the job the American people gave her 3.5 years ago. And the fact that she isn't tells you a lot about how much you can trust her actual plans. Now, Donald Trump's economic plan is not just a plan, but it's also a record. A lot of those same economists attack Donald Trump's plans, and they have PhDs, but they don't have common sense, and they don't have wisdom. Because Donald Trump's economic policies delivered the highest take-home pay in a generation in this country, 1.5% inflation, and to boot, peace and security all over the world. So when people say that Donald Trump's economic plan doesn't make sense, I say look at the record. He delivered rising take-home pay for American workers. Now, Tim admirably admits that they want to undo the Trump tax cuts. But if you look at what was so different about Donald Trump's tax cuts, even from previous Republican tax cut plans, is that a lot of those resources went to giving more take-home pay to middle-class and working-class Americans. It was passed in 2017, and you saw an American economic boom unlike we've seen in a generation in this country. That is a record that I'm proud to run on, and we're going to get back to that common sense wisdom so that you can afford to live the American dream again. I know a lot of you are struggling. I know a lot of you are worried about paying the bills. It's going to stop when Donald Trump brings back common sense to this country.
Governor, do you want to respond to that? What has Kamala
Harris's
Harris
plan
done
decreases
for the middle class?
economic activity 800 billion. Trump's increases at 1.7 trillion.
Failure on COVID that led to the collapse of our economy. We were already before COVID in a manufacturing recession, but 10 million people out of work, largest percentage since the Great Depression. 9 million jobs closed on that. That was day one. Whether it was the Infrastructure Act or other things.
Then why did your state outpace the abysmal failure of the rest of the country? 10,500 businesses closed, never to open up. The kind of economic disaster that took place in your state was worse than the rest of the country. Because if Donald Trump had done what your party wanted, the entire country would have looked like your state, prick.
Of the day is this. If you need heart surgery, listen to the people at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, not Donald Trump. And the same thing goes with this. And I ask you out there, teachers, nurses, truck drivers, whatever, how is it fair that you're paying your taxes every year?
Drink game rules again.
Donald Trump hasn't paid any federal tax in the last 15 years, and the last year as president. That's what's wrong with the system. There's a way around it, and he's bragged about that. We're just asking for fairness in it, and that's all you want.
You have a minute.
Governor, you say trust the experts. But those same experts for 40 years said that if we shipped our manufacturing base off to China, we'd get cheaper goods. They lied about that. They said if we shipped our industrial base off to other countries, to Mexico and elsewhere, it would make the middle class stronger. They were wrong about that. They were wrong about the idea.
Just annihilate the middle class by sending all the jobs over to China. That's how you save the middle class right there.
First time in a generation, Donald Trump had the wisdom and the courage to say to that bipartisan consensus, we're not doing it anymore. We're bringing American manufacturing back. We're unleashing American energy. We're going to make more
you may have just shored up Pennsylvania.
This isn't just an economic issue. And I've got 3 beautiful little kids at home, 7, 4, and 2, and I love them very much, and I hope they're in bed right now. But look, so many of the drugs, the pharmaceuticals that we put in the bodies of our children are manufactured by nations that hate us. This has to stop, and we're not going to stop it by listening to experts. We're going to stop it by listening to common sense wisdom, which is what Donald Trump governed on.
Senator, your time is up. Governor Walz, can you address that? I mean, voters say they trust Donald
Walz
Trump.
Walz looks really twitchy and very pink.
If you're listening tonight and you want billionaires to get tax cuts, you heard what the numbers were. Look.
His face looks like a newborn baby's butt after they spank it for the first breath.
But I understand that, look, we produce soybeans and corn. We need to have fair trading partners. That's something that we believe in.
How do you feel about tariffs?
I think the thing that
helps you have fair trade.
Most concerns me on this is Donald Trump was the guy who created the largest trade deficit in American history with China. So the rhetoric is good. Much of what the senator said right there, I'm in agreement with him on this. I watched it happen too. I watched it in my communities, and we talked about that. But we had people undercutting the right to collectively bargain. We had right to work states made it more difficult. We had
he's trying to get the unions right now.
Folks that are
look at his face. Clip this face, guys. We're gonna go back to his face.
This
crazy.
Donald Trump is talking about it. Kamala Harris has a record 250,000 more manufacturing jobs just out of the IRA.
I believe Donald Trump had 450,000 more.
Yes.
I thought it was 450,000.
Appreciate
Mission
that.
Control, let me know.
If you notice, what Governor Walz just did is he said, first of all, Donald Trump has to listen to the experts. And then when he acknowledged that the experts screwed up, he said, well, Donald Trump didn't do nearly as good of a job as the statistics
that's a
show
gross generalization.
that he did. So what Tim Walz is doing, and I honestly, Tim, you've got a tough job here, because you've got to play whack-a-mole. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver rising take-home pay, which of course he did. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver lower inflation, which of course he did. And then you simultaneously got to defend Kamala Harris's atrocious economic record, which has made gas, groceries, and housing unaffordable for American citizens. I was raised by a woman
I didn't think I was
who
going
would
to feel
sometimes
bad
go
for
into
Tim
medical
Walz tonight.
debt
I
so
don't
that
feel
she
bad.
could
Walz,
afford that.
he's getting absolutely slaughtered. He is getting annihilated right now.
We can do so much better. To all of you watching, we
Beast
can
mode
get back
drink.
to
For
an
those who are new,
America that's
drinking game
affordable
rules.
again.
Drink anytime
We
Walz doesn't
just
answer
gotta
question
get back
directly.
to
Someone mentions
common
Product
sense
2025.
economic
Walz mentions
principles.
coach or
I hope we
teacher.
have a
JD Vance goes beast
conversation
mode or
on
anytime they gang up
healthcare
on
that-
Vance.
Senator, Governor.
Please.
Thank you. Margaret?
We have a lot to get to ahead, gentlemen, on many topics. But right now, I want to talk about personal qualifications. The vice president is often the last voice the president hears before making consequential decisions.
Or in the case of Biden, the
We wanna
last
ask
voice he
you
hears
about
before
your
pillows over his
leadership
face.
qualities. Governor Walz, you said you were in Hong
that you
Kong
were there
during
with
the
me on that.
deadly Tiananmen Square
here we
protests in the spring of
Okay, hold on a second. To be
1989.
fair, he was in Nebraska, but he was in Tiananmen Square, Nebraska.
You actually didn't travel
Yes.
to Asia until that year.
They just
Can
said
you
it.
explain that discrepancy? You have 2 minutes.
Well, and to the folks out there who didn't get at the top of this, look,
It's his grammar.
I grew up in small rural Nebraska, town of 400.
My grammar's
town
bad.
You rode your bike with
Thought
your
I was
buddies
in
till the
China.
streetlights come on, and I'm proud of that service. I joined the National Guard at 17, worked on family farms.
Question
and then
again.
I
You lied about
used the
Tiananmen
GI
Square.
Bill to become a teacher, passionate about it, a young teacher. My first year out, I got the opportunity in the summer of '89 to travel to China. 35
And you did it
years
33
ago,
more
to be able
times,
to do
including
that.
your honeymoon.
I came back home and then started a program to take young people there. We would take basketball teams, we would take baseball teams, we would take dancers.
You wouldn't
and
tell
we
the
would go
parents?
back and forth to
Dancers?
China.
What?
The issue
Sell
for
them.
that was to try and learn. Now look, my community knows who I am. They saw where I was at. I will be the first to tell you, I have poured my heart into my community. I've tried to do the best I
course you're the
can,
first to
but
tell
I've
you.
not been perfect. And I'm a knucklehead at times, but it's always been about that. Those same people elected me to Congress for 12 years.
And they're idiots.
And in Congress, I was one of the most bipartisan people, working on things like farm bills that we got done, working on veterans benefits. And then the people of Minnesota were able to elect me to governor twice. So look,
Governor Walz,
my
were you in
commitment
Tiananmen
has
Square or were
been
you in
from the
Nebraska?
beginning
I was in
to
Nebraska.
make sure that
That's-
I'm
yeah.
there for the people.
Sorry,
to make sure that I get
I lied
this
about
right.
that.
I will
Answer
say
the question,
more
right?
than anything. Many times I will talk a lot. I
Has he
will get
answered
caught
any?
up in the rhetoric. But being there, the impact it made, the difference it made in my life, I learned a lot about China. I hear the critiques of this. I would make the case that Donald Trump should have come on one of those trips with us. I guarantee you he wouldn't be praising Xi
Business
Jinping
internationally, you
about
moron.
COVID. And I guarantee
You
he wouldn't
printed
start a
Mao's
trade war
little
that he
red
ends up
book and
losing.
gave it out as
So
a
this
gift,
is about
dummy.
trying to
And you weren't in
understand
Tiananmen
the
Square.
world. It's about trying
big
to
deal.
do the best you can for your community. And then it's putting yourself out there and letting your folks understand what it is. My commitment, whether it be through teaching, which I was good at, or whether it was
Drink.
being a good
He's not
soldier,
answering.
or
There you
being
go.
a
Drink.
good
And
member of
teach.
Congress.
Drinking game
Those
rules.
are the
Bring it up
things
so we don't
that
have to
I
look at
think
his
the
pink
values
fetus
people
face.
care about.
He did not answer.
Governor, just to follow up on that, the question was,
Everyone hold.
can you explain the discrepancy?
All I said on this was I got there that summer and misspoke on this. So I will
Again?
just, that's what I've said.
Summer and a
So I was
huge
in
political event is
A little different.
a little
Hong
different.
Kong and China during the democracy protests went in. And
I went to New York City in November of 2001.
In governance.
I never made the mistake of saying
Thank you,
I was there
Governor.
for 9/11.
Senator Vance, in 2016, you called your running mate Donald Trump unfit for the
a real bad
nation's
answer.
highest office, and you said he could be America's Hitler. I know you've been asked many
Hitler,
times, and
different
you've
man.
said you regret those comments and explained you then voted for Donald Trump in 2020. But the Washington Post reported new messages last week in which you
Walz is like beyond a fish out of water right now. It is actually sad to watch.
He, quote, Trump thoroughly failed to deliver his economic populism.
Like, he's just getting annihilated. Oh my God.
Line with his. If you become vice president, why should Americans trust that you will give Donald Trump the advice he needs to hear and not just the advice he wants to hear? You have
Thank
2
you.
minutes.
And you're not the dumb
Well, first
that
of all,
people say
Mark,
you
because
are.
I've always been open. And sometimes, of course, I've disagreed with the president, but I've also been extremely open about the fact that I was wrong about Donald Trump. I was wrong, first of all, because I believed some of the media stories that turned out to be dishonest fabrications of his record. But most importantly, Donald Trump delivered for the American people. Rising wages, rising take-home pay, an economy that worked for normal Americans, a secure southern border, a lot of things, frankly, that I didn't think he'd be able to deliver on. And
Thank you very
when you
much.
screw up, when you misspeak, when you get something wrong
he was
and
there.
you change your mind, you ought to be honest with the American people about it. It's one of the reasons, Margaret, why I've done so many interviews is because I think it's important to actually explain to the American people where I come down on the issues and what changed. Now, you pointed out to messages from 2020. Margaret, I've been
59
extremely
interviews.
consistent that I think there were a lot of things that we could have done better in the Trump administration the first round if Congress was doing its job. I strongly believe, and I've been a United States senator, that Congress is not just a high-class debating society. It's
I
not just
also like to believe that Vance is a very smooth talker and can probably talk his way out of pretty much anything. This guy is very charismatic, just based off of his speech here alone tonight.
In Congress had been a little bit better about how they govern the country. They were so obsessed with impeaching Donald Trump, they couldn't actually govern. And I want to talk about this tariff issue in particular, Margaret, because Tim just accused this of being a national sales tax. Look, the one thing, and you're probably surprised to hear me praising Joe Biden, but the one thing that Joe Biden did is he continued some of the Trump tariffs that protected American manufacturing jobs. And it's the one issue,
Trump
the
created
most pro-worker part of the
414,000
Biden
manufacturing
administration,
jobs.
it's the one issue where Kamala Harris has run away from Joe Biden's record. Think about this. If you're trying to employ slave laborers in China at $3 a day, you're going to do that and undercut the wages of American workers unless
like Jeffrey
our
Dahmer's
country
lawyer.
stands up for itself and says you're not accessing our markets unless you're paying middle-class Americans a fair wage.
Every time another piece of
your
evidence
time
comes
is
in.
up.
You hate that guy?
Nora?
Thank you. Now to the issue of
Walz's head
reproductive
is moving
rights.
like I do with a sock puppet when I do a show for my kids. Like,
You signed a bill into law.
414,000 jobs for Trump for manufacturing, only 173,000 by Harris. 592 were returning from
said in the
COVID.
last debate
there you go.
that you believe abortion, quote, in the 9th month is absolutely fine. Yes or no? Is that what you support? I'll give you 2 minutes.
That's not what the bill says.
They gave him an out by asking support.
This issue is what's on everyone's mind.
He needs to pin him down
Donald
on the
Trump
mat
put
and not
this
let him
all in
draw a line.
motion. He
Where is it?
brags about how great it was that he put the judges in and overturned Roe versus Wade. 52 years of personal autonomy.
question was 9 months.
And then
That's
he
your
tells
state.
us, oh, we send it to the states. It's a beautiful thing. Amanda Zaworski would disagree with you on it's a beautiful thing. A young bride in Texas waiting for their child at 18 weeks. She has a complication, a tear in the membrane. She needs to go in. The medical care at that point needs to be decided by the doctor. And that would have been an abortion. But in Texas, that would have put them in legal jeopardy. She went home, got sepsis, nearly dies, and now she may have difficulty having children. Or in Kentucky, Hadley Duvall, a 12-year-old child raped and impregnated by her stepfather. Those
Less
are
than
horrific.
1% of all
Now,
abortions
when
are
God
medically
asked about
necessary
that,
or due to rape or
Senator Vance
incest.
said
Less than
two wrongs don't make a
0.5%.
right.
New
There
study,
is
just a
no
new
right
poll confirmed it again.
in this.
The question
So in
is about
Minnesota,
the rest
what
of them.
we did was restore
All of them.
Roe versus Wade. We made sure that we put women in charge of their health care. But look, this is not where, if you don't know Amanda or a Hadley, you soon will. Their Project 2025.
Oh, no, I drink Project 2025.
Yeah. It's going to make it more difficult, if not impossible, to get contraception and limit access, if not eliminate access to infertility.
Here's how I know that's
treatment.
horseshit.
For so
Hobby
many
Lobby
of the
provided
listening, me
16 out of
included,
21 forms of birth control because they're a more
child.
Christian company,
That's
and you still
nobody
claimed it a
else's
travesty of
business.
human rights.
But those things are being
He also said
proposed.
IVF
And
without
the
saying it.
catch-all on this is, well, the states will decide. What's right for Texas might not be right for Washington.
He's going to say
That's
slavery.
not how this works.
Yes,
This
it
is
is.
basic human
It's
rights.
exactly
we
how it
have
works.
seen maternal mortality skyrocket in Texas outpacing many other countries in the world. This is about health care. In Minnesota, we are ranked first in health care for a reason. We trust women. We trust doctors.
Senator, do you want to respond to the governor's claim? Will you create a federal pregnancy monitoring agency?
No, Nora, certainly we won't. And I want to talk about this issue.
Gives an answer,
a lot of
and
Americans
then
care about it. I know
substantiates
a lot of Americans don't agree with everything that I've ever said on this topic. And, you know, I grew up in a working class family in a neighborhood where I knew a lot of young women who had unplanned pregnancies and decided to terminate those pregnancies because they feel like they didn't have any other options. And, you know, one of them is actually very dear to me. And I know she's watching tonight, and I love you. And she told me something a couple years ago that she felt like if she hadn't had that abortion, that it would have destroyed her life because she was in an abusive relationship. And I think that what I take from that as a Republican who proudly wants to protect innocent life in this country, who proudly wants to protect the vulnerable, is that my party, we've got to do so much better of a job at earning the American people's trust back on this issue where they frankly just don't trust us. And I think that's one of the things that Donald Trump and I are endeavoring to do. I want us as a Republican Party to be pro-family in the fullest sense of the word. I want us to support fertility treatments. I want us to make it easier for moms to afford to have babies. I want it to make it easier for young families to afford a home so they can afford a place to raise that family. And I think there's so much that we can do on the public policy
Look at the
front
eyes of Tim Walz.
just to give women more options. Now, of course, Donald Trump has been very clear that on the abortion policy specifically, that we have a big country and it's diverse. And California has a different viewpoint on this than Georgia. Georgia has a different viewpoint from Arizona. And the proper way to handle this, as messy as democracy sometimes is to let voters make these decisions, let the individual states make their abortion policy. And I think that's what makes the most sense in a very big, a very diverse, and let's be honest, sometimes a very, very messy and divided country.
Governor, would you like to respond and also answer the question about restrictions?
Yeah, well, the question got asked, and Donald Trump made the accusation that wasn't true about Minnesota. Well, let me tell you about this idea that there's diverse states. There's a young woman named Amber Thurman. She happened to be in Georgia, a restricted state.
putting these people
because of that, she had to travel a long distance
couple hours
to
or
North
so.
Carolina
3 or 4
to try and get her care.
Showed up late.
She showed up late for an appointment, so they gave her the pill instead of the procedure she was scheduled for. Same pill they give to everybody.
The fact of the matter is, how can we as a nation
she had a complication
say that
from
your
it.
life,
as many people do with abortion
pills, as basic
One of, I
as
think,
the right
26
to
or 36
control your
women
own
that died from
body is determined on geography? There's a very real chance, had Amber Thurman lived in Minnesota, she would be alive today.
If she was on time for her
That's why the
appointment.
restoration of Roe versus Wade.
Same
When you
abortion
listen to
pill in
Vice President
Minnesota
Harris
as
talk
it
about
is
this subject,
in
and
Georgia.
You hear me talk about it. You hear us talking exactly the
Carolina.
same. Donald Trump is trying to figure out how to get the political right of this. I agree with a lot of what Senator Vance said about what's happening. His running mate, though, does not, and that's the problem.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, let me ask you about that. He mentioned, it was, I think, referring to a national ban. In the past, you have supported a federal ban on abortion after 15 weeks. In fact, you said if someone can't support legislation like that, quote,
so after
you
4
are
months,
making the United States
is that radical now? I'm sorry. Is a ban on abortion after 4 months radical?
In the entire world. My question is
it just me, or is that entirely sensitive? That would be in line with Europe.
Well, Nora, first of all, I never supported a national
Be in line with most of the rest of the modern world, just to be clear. We're the most radical of all developed nations on this.
National standard. For example, we have a partial birth abortion ban in place in this country at the federal level. I don't think anybody's trying to get rid of that, or at least I hope not, though I know that Democrats have taken a very radical pro-abortion stance. But Nora, you know, one of the things that changed is in the state of Ohio, we had a referendum in 2023, and the people of Ohio voted overwhelmingly, by the way, against my position. And I think that what I learned from that, Nora, is that we've got to do a better job at winning back people's trust. So many young women would love to have families. So many young women also see an unplanned pregnancy as something that's going to destroy their livelihood, destroy their education, destroy their relationships. And we have got to earn people's trust back. And that's why Donald Trump and I are committed to pursuing pro-family policies, making child care more accessible, making fertility treatments more accessible, because we've got to do a better job at that. And that's what real leadership is.
Minnesota, one of 9 states with no limit on abortion.
On the pro-abortion piece of that. No, we're not. We're pro-women. We're pro-freedom to make your own choice. We know what the implications
are you pro-freedom for cars?
Rewording it.
Are you pro-freedom for school choice?
Women not getting the care physicians feeling like they may
But
be
parents to make sure that their
prosecuted
kids
for
aren't
providing that
transitioned
care.
unbeknownst to them.
And as far as making sure that we're educating our children and giving them options, Minnesota's a state with one of the lowest teen pregnancy rates. We understand that too. We know that the options need to be available, and we make that true. We also make it, we're a top 3 state for the best place to raise children. But these two things to try and say
for a
that
Somali
we're
pirate.
pro-children, but we don't like this, or you guys are
bar's low.
pro-abortion, that's not the case at all. We are pro-freedoms for women to make their choices, and we're going, and Kamala Harris is making the case, to make options for children more affordable, a $6,000 child tax
those
credit.
women have the
but
choice
we're
to go to
not gonna
work
base
during
that on the
COVID or
fact
keep their
of
business
making
open during
someone like
COVID,
Amber
or
Thurman
what school they send their kids to
drive
during
600
COVID.
miles to try
Should they have the
and help
choice of being able to use, for example, fossil fuels?
Governor, I agree with
Drive
you.
an SUV?
Amber Thurman should still be alive, and there are a lot of people who should still be alive, and I certainly wish that she was. And maybe you're free to disagree with me on this and explain this to me, but as I read the Minnesota law that you signed into law, the statute that you signed into law, it says that a doctor who presides over an abortion where the baby survives, the doctor is under no obligation to provide life-saving care to a baby who survives a botched late-term abortion. That is, I think,
That's
whether
not
you're
true.
pro-choice or
That's not how the law
pro-abortion,
is.
that is fundamentally barbaric.
Explain it.
And that's why I use that
Fact
word,
check, is
Nora,
that in the law,
because
guys?
some of what we've seen.
Yes, it is.
Do you want to force Catholic hospitals to perform abortions against their will? Because Kamala Harris has supported suing Catholic nuns to violate their freedom of conscience. We can
Walz
be
looks
a
like
big
a
and diverse
deer
country
in headlights right now.
conscience and make the country more pro-baby and pro-family. But please.
Yes, Governor, please respond.
Look, this is one where there's always something there. This is a very simple proposition. These are women's decisions to make about their health care
You said
decisions.
it's not true. They
And
gave you the floor to
physicians
correct it.
Who know best when they need
Yeah,
to do
he's
this. Trying to
just
distort-
dodging. This is a typical Trudeau thing. Just dodges the question.
Please tell me, what was I wrong
That is
about?
not the way the law is written.
Educate
Look,
me.
I've given
But
this,
how?
I've given this advice on a lot of things that getting
not a
involved,
lawyer.
that's been misread, and it was fact-checked at the last debate. But the point on this is there's a continuation.
Oh, that was one of the
of
false
these
fact
guys
checks, by the way.
to try
Yeah,
and
Where they
enforce
said no
or to get
abortions are being
involved.
performed
Use this
late term in this
Just mind
country.
your
By the way,
own
it's 10 to
business.
15,000 a year
Things
every
work
single year.
best
And
when
yes,
Roe
the
versus
law
Wade
does
was
read
in
like that
place.
law did in
When we
Illinois
did
that
Roe
Barack Obama
restoration of
voted
Roe,
against
that works best.
amending with the Infant Born Alive Act, or Infants Born Alive Act. I don't want to miss the plural and be fact checked, that doctors were required to give the same kind of medical care to babies who survived abortions as babies who were willingly delivered. It is not law in Minnesota. They are not required to provide that life-saving care for a baby if they survive an abortion.
When
That's a
you're not
fact.
proposing them in your budget. Kamala Harris is proposing them. She's proposing all those things to make life easier for families.
I asked a specific question, Governor. You gave me a slogan as a response.
It's not the case. It's not true. That's not what the law says. So they fact-checked it with President Trump.
Gentlemen, there's a lot to discuss. We have to move on.
Vance, let him speak and then just a smile. He just office gymmed him with.
Yeah, that was the prosecutor in the Dahmer case.
And a Walz sitting to answer the question.
That was pretty epic. We're not going anywhere, guys. Stay with us.
Yeah, stay with us.
as
Do we
they
have
take a break.
the half game report here with the fact checks?
So I've hit a lot of those fact checks. So most European countries have 12-week abortion bans. There's some that have up to, I think, 24.
Just the UK, yeah.
12 weeks. And JD and Vance said he supported a ban after 14 weeks?
15.
I believe it was 14. It was 15. Yeah, that's right. It was
Somewhere
15.
around there.
It was 15.
Yeah, exactly.
Good memory, yes.
So a couple of fact checks on the trade deficit that Trump created, kind of air quotes, was $418 billion in 2018. He started the trade war in the Q3 of 2018. By the next year, it was reduced by 22.2%. So they try to cherry pick data, just like the manufacturing jobs. Trump created 414,000. They've only created 173,000 new ones. 592 are bounce back that were lost because of COVID when you shut down factories. Those don't count. For you coming in and flipping on the light switch, it doesn't count as a new job created. So there's that. And then there was a couple of others that I will go to.
The Minnesota law, make sure you guys bring
Yeah.
that up because that's obviously very clear that, they are not required to. First off, just to make it clear, Walz did not answer on there are no limitations on abortion up until and including birth 9 months. That's absolutely true. Everyone knows that. What J.D. Vance brought up was the fact is they actually wouldn't be required to provide that kind of care to babies who survived abortions, which is also true. Because that is the reason he's bringing that up is because that's been required by law because, in fact, it was happening in states like Minnesota, in states like Illinois, in states like Virginia, where babies were surviving abortions and doctors were saying, well, I've done my part, and the babies were not given the same kind of health care as a baby who was delivered. Once they're born, we all thought, hey, at least now you have to take care of them. They didn't do that in Illinois. They didn't do that in Minnesota. That's the reason for people proposing putting that expressly in writing. Yes, Gerald.
So the bill strips out Minnesota's existing requirement that reasonable measures be taken to preserve the life and health of born-alive infants, replacing it with a requirement for care, which the bill's author, Representative Tina Liebling, has described as mere comfort care. So the bill's author says instead of a requirement, this is crazy,
so a pillow and
to preserve the life and health of a born-alive child who survives an abortion, instead we replace it with comfort care. The bill's author...
The only way this has a happy ending that doesn't make me mad is if that bitch turned into a pillar of salt.
They went from life-saving care to hospice. That's okay. That's what they're arguing, the technicality. By the way, this is what CNN talked about all day today and yesterday, about how they were worried that because he's a lawyer and he's well-read and he's well-spoken and he's a Yale law graduate, that they were worried that Walz was going to have a hard time. And right there was a great example of how he was just like, let me go to a law and then go ahead and just...
This entire debate has been a perfect show of that Walz cannot handle himself. He was not ready for this. You could just see it in his eyes, his face, the way he is nodding and agreeing with Vance's own points. And he's debating them. It's just...
I laid out the strategy. He's following it to the letter. I know this because we know that all these people who surround these candidates, they always tell them to play it safe. He's taking ownership of his mistakes. He's talking directly to the people. He's parrying. He's not going on defense, and he's contrasting with the record. Now, it's not easy to do because consultants and advisors have to have the raw material to work with. J.D. Vance is quick on his feet. Do you notice that he always answers exactly what is given to him? It's like Bruce Lee said, be water, my friend. You become the glass, right? Even though Bruce Lee couldn't fight at all. Yeah. But the point is, he's answering. He's answering, and he's using this. He really is jujitsuing it back on Tim Walz. He's able... Yeah.
No bait taken.
No bait taken. He's been very, very congenial about it. But let's bring up the drinking game rules again really quickly
it's a lot
for people who are tuning in right now. Anytime Walz does not directly answer a question, you drink. Anytime someone mentions Project 2025, drink. Anytime Walz mentions coach or teacher, drink. Anytime J.D. Vance goes beast mode, drink. That's been a lot tonight.
And that was another thing. The Democrats consistently try to pair Trump and Vance with Project 2025, but Trump has said himself numerous times now that he has no affiliation with it. It has nothing to do with him. But the Democrats know that it's a good buzzword. It's something they can continue to use, that people know about, and that they can easily associate the two with. Looks like we're getting back at it.
Oh my God.
I have it, I know.
Children and teens in America is by firearms.
Okay. No, not true.
They said children and teens.
Legislation that Democrats claim will
that's not what the administration says.
You oppose red flag gun laws and
legislation
to ban certain semi-automatic rifles.
Whoa, a loaded question. By the way, not even close to car accidents, accidents in the home. If you take out 15 to 19-year-old gangbangers, gun violence doesn't even crack the top 10 of the list. I hope J.D. Vance answers it.
10 years in prison. Do you think holding parents responsible could curb mass shootings? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, Nora, on that particular case, I don't know the full details, but I certainly trust local law enforcement and local authorities to make those decisions. I think in some cases the answer is going to be yes, and in some cases the answer is going to be no. And the details really matter here, of course. For example, if a kid steals a gun, that's going to be different than if a parent hands over a gun knowing that their kid is potentially dangerous. But look, I want to just sort of speak as a father of 3 beautiful little kids, and our oldest is now in 2nd grade. And like a lot of parents, we send our kids to school with such hope and such joy and such pride at their little faces on the first day of school. And we know, unfortunately, that a lot of kids are going to experience this terrible epidemic of gun violence. And of course, our hearts go out to the families that are affected by this terrible stuff. And we do have to do better. And I think that Governor Walz and I actually probably agree that we need to do better on this. The question is just, how do we actually do it? Now, here's something that really bothers me and worries me about this epidemic of violence. The gross majority, close to 90% in some of the statistics I've seen, of the gun violence in this country is committed with illegally obtained firearms. And while we're on that topic, we know that thanks to Kamala Harris's open border, we've seen a massive influx in the number of illegal guns run by the Mexican drug cartels. So that number, the amount of illegal guns in our country is higher today than it was 3.5 years ago.
He's like a brilliant boxer.
What do we do about
He moves so that Walz is going to have to move his body so he opens up a shot. He just moved it to border.
Because I don't want my kids to go to school in a school that feels unsafe or where there are visible signs of security. But I unfortunately think that we have to increase security in our schools. We have to make the doors lock better. We have to make the doors stronger. We've got to make the windows stronger. And of course, we've got to increase school resource officers, because the idea that we can magically wave a wand and take guns out of the hands of bad guys, it just doesn't fit with recent experience. So we've got to make our schools safer. And I think we've got to have some common sense bipartisan solutions for how to do that.
Governor, you have 2 minutes.
Well, I think all the parents watching tonight, this is your biggest nightmare. Look, I got a 17-year-old, and he witnessed a shooting at a community center playing volleyball. Those things don't leave you. As a member of Congress, I sat in my office surrounded by dozens of the Sandy Hook parents, and they were looking at my 7-year-old picture on the wall. Their 7-year-old were dead, and they were asking us to do something. And look, I'm a hunter. I own firearms. The vice president is. We understand that the Second Amendment is there, but our first responsibility is to our kids to figure this out. In Minnesota, we've enacted enhanced red flag laws, enhanced background checks, and we can start to get data. But here's the problem. If we really want to solve this, we've got folks that won't allow research to be even done on gun violence.
Bullshit.
And this
Guys,
idea
bring that up. We fact-checked that. It was the CDC was the fact that they wanted to selectively research gun violence. These are the same people, by the way, who stopped recording the victim in the case of a perpetrated crime against them, the race of the victim, but only the race of the actual assailant.
But that's not far enough when we know there are things that worked.
They wanted to discount the 500,000 to 3 million defensive uses of firearms each year.
They don't have this happen, even though they have a high gun ownership rate in the country. There are reasonable things that we can do to make a difference. It's not infringing on your Second Amendment. And the idea to have some of these weapons out there, it just doesn't make any sense.
Ones you carried in war?
Kamala Harris, as an attorney general, worked on this issue. She knows that it's there. No one's trying to scaremonger and say we're taking your guns, but I ask all of you
Except
out there,
she literally said we're taking your guns. Bring it up in the fact check at the end of the show. Mission Control.
Is that what we have to go when we know there's countries around the world that their children aren't practicing these types of drills? They're being kids. We owe it to them to get a fix. These are things that shouldn't be that difficult. You can still keep your firearms, and we can make a difference. We have to. If you're listening tonight, this...
See, he says that you can keep your firearms, but they did those massive buybacks where they were begging people to turn in their weapons.
It is awful. And I appreciate what Tim said actually about Finland, because I do think it illustrates some of the frankly weird differences between our own country's gun violence problem and Finland. Is okay, first of all, we have way higher rates of mental health abuse or mental health substance abuse. We have way higher rates of depression, way higher rates of anxiety. We unfortunately have a mental health crisis in this country that I really do think that we need to get to the root causes of, because I don't think it's the whole reason why we have such a bad gun violence problem, but I do think it's a big piece of it. Another driver of the gun violence epidemic, especially that affecting our kids, it doesn't earn as many headlines, but is the terrible gun violence problem in a lot of our big cities. And this is why we have to empower law enforcement to arrest the bad guys, put them away, and take gun offenders off the streets. I think there's a whole host of things that we can do here, but I do think at our schools we've got to talk about more security.
Senator, thank you. Governor, you previously opposed an assault weapons ban, but it only later in your political
1,400
career.
disease, traffic accidents, cancers, and congenital issues.
Sandy Hook parents. I've become friends with school shooters. I've seen it. Look, the NRA, I was an NRA guy for a long time.
You've become friends with school shooters?
What? I'm of an age where my shotgun was in my car so I could pheasant hunt after football practice. That's not where we live today.
Why not?
And several things I want to mention on this is,
why not? Yeah.
Talking about cities and where it's at, the number one where the most firearm deaths happen in Minnesota are rural suicides. And we have an epidemic
but
of
no one's really concerned about that. They're just talking about violent crime.
Yeah, that was a really bad pivot to try and
making sure folks have health care and all that, but I want to be very careful. This idea of stigmatizing mental health, just because you have a mental health issue doesn't mean you're violent. And I think what we end up doing
is you support red flag laws, dummy.
That's exactly what red flag laws is.
Guns. It's just the guns, and there are
it's
things
not
that
just
you can
the guns.
do.
Holy shit! He just lost. He just maybe lost the election. It's just the guns. He maybe just lost the. It's the single losingest issue for Democrats across this country.
2 sentences ago, nobody's trying to take away your guns. It's just the guns.
Contributor to inflation.
By the way, 2019, Kamala Harris promises mandatory government plan for buyback of guns.
Of more than 4 million homes in the United States, and that contributes to the high housing prices. Governor Walz, The Harris campaign promises a $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers.
Which will increase the cost of homes by $25,000.
And a $10,000 tax credit. They also promise to build 3 million new homes. Where are you building these homes, and won't handing out that kind of money just drive up prices higher?
No, it's not handing out. We have, first, let me say this issue of housing.
No.
And I think those of you listening on this, the problem we've had is that we've got a lot of folks that see housing as another commodity. It can be bought up, it can be shifted, it can be moved around. Those are not folks living in those houses. Those of you listening tonight, that house is a big deal. I bought and owned one house in my life. My mom still lives in the house where I was.
What about the stable?
And when I think of a house, I'm thinking of Christmas services after midnight mass where you go with your family. We need to make it more affordable. And one of the things, as I said, this program that the Vice President is pushing forward and bringing a new way of approaching this is something we're doing in Minnesota from that lead. We in the state invested in making sure our housing was the biggest investment that we'd ever made in housing.
Also,
it starts to make it
temperatures are,
easier. We cut some of the red tape. Local
that.
folks, look, we can't do it at the federal level, but local folks make it easier to build those homes. And then that down payment assistance. I can tell all of you out there, one of the, certainly for me, using the GI Bill was one thing, but a veteran's home loan, the big thing about a veteran's home loan is you don't have to pay the down payment. Those are things that make it there. Now, look, you're going to pay
You earn that.
and you're going to pay your mortgage. Those are things that we know in the long run, the appreciated value, the generational wealth that's created from it. And I will give Minneapolis an example. Minneapolis is the one city where we've seen the lowest inflation rates. We've seen a 12% increase
you know
in
what?
stock
I'll give him this
because
one.
we
How about
put
this?
some of these
You serve
things
your
in,
country?
and we're
All right, you don't have to make a down payment.
You
earn it.
program to make sure we
It's not free.
I don't think you should have to. Serve your country? All right. Oh, wait, no, wait. That's already policy.
People
I have
with
to use the
stable
bathroom.
housing end up with stable jobs. People with stable housing have their kids able to get to school. All of those things in the long run end up saving our money. And that's the thing that I think we should be able to find some common ground in. But we can't blame immigrants for the only reason. That's not the case that's happening in many cities. The fact that
They're lowering
is
inventory.
that
Economy
we don't
and
have
immigrants
enough
and
they're lowering inventory.
affordable housing, but we can make sure that the government's there to help kickstart it, create that base.
Governor, your time is up. Senator Vance, as far as your campaign's position, the promise is to seize federal lands to build homes, remove regulation, provide tax breaks, and cut back on immigration, which you say pushes up prices. Where are you going to build all the new homes you're promising, and what part of any of this plan will provide immediate relief? You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, Tim just said something that I agree with. We don't want to blame immigrants for higher housing prices, but we do want to blame Kamala Harris for letting in millions of illegal aliens into this country, which does drive up costs, Tim. 25 million illegal aliens competing with Americans for scarce homes is one of the most significant drivers of home prices in the country. It's why we have massive increases in home prices that have happened right alongside massive increases in illegal alien populations.
Don't forget mortgage
under
rates.
Kamala Harris's leadership. Now, Tim just mentioned a bunch of ideas. Now, some of those ideas I actually think are halfway decent, and some of them I disagree with. But the most important thing here is Kamala Harris is not running as a newcomer to politics. She is the sitting vice president. If she wants to enact all of these policies to make housing more affordable, I invite her to use the office that the American people already gave her, not sit around and campaign and do nothing while Americans find the American dream of homeownership completely unaffordable. Now, you asked, Margaret, what would immediately change the equation for American citizens? If you lower energy prices, as Donald Trump says, drill, baby, drill, one of the biggest drivers of housing costs aside from illegal immigration is, think about it, if a truck driver is paying 40% more for diesel, then the lumber he's delivering to the job site to build the house is also going to become a lot more expensive. If we open up American energy, you will get immediate pricing relief for American citizens, not, by the way, just in housing, but in a whole host of other economic goods, too.
That's a good answer.
Senator Vance, you still have 23 seconds there. Do you want to answer?
Yeah, like Walz came out of nowhere. Nobody knows where this guy came from. And I feel like kind of the same thing with Vance. Both of these guys kind of just showed up. And I don't know. This is really showing and very telling of how they are as individuals, how they think and what they want to do for this country. And sitting there watching Walz just blatantly agree pretty much with everything. I mean, they're both agreeing with each other on some things, but you gotta have a solid plan, and with the way Vance speaks, it sounds like he is delivering something that Americans would want in the future. Right now, Walz is just, I don't, he's not looking too hot right now in this debate.
Not trying to find the solution. I was going to ask, though, on this question, are we going to drill and build houses in the same federal land? And I think when people hear federal lands, these are really important pieces of land.
Like, he can barely answer the questions that are given. And Vance just looks at him and smiles because he knows he's just going off of the top of his head. He doesn't know anything. He has no plan for this shit he's talking about.
Cares deeply about our national parks and our federal
look,
lands.
Walz is just not doing well.
We protect these things.
Vance is doing a really good job of giving something to Walz that is universally agreeable, where people are going, yeah, it's reasonable. And then Walz is going, well, yeah, but he's done better than I would advise. He didn't take the bait on the gun death stat because he doesn't want to become adversarial with the moderators. He loses the ability to call them out. He becomes adversarial. I don't think I've ever seen someone do a better job than this. The closest I can remember is Carly Fiorina in the primaries in 2016.
You don't like the economists.
Huge disappointment since then.
Yeah, Vance has been very swift this debate. It's a shock.
That point, I'd like for you to clarify, there are many contributing factors to high housing.
I expected him to be good, but I did not expect him to be like this.
Supply and demand, economy 101.
There's a Federal Reserve study that we're happy to share after the debate. We'll put it up on social media, actually, that really drills down on the
when I
connection
interviewed
between
Trump
increased
surrogate and I said create a website,
especially illegal immigration and higher housing prices. Now, of course, Margaret, that's not the entire driver of higher housing prices. It's also the regulatory regime of Kamala Harris. Look, we are a country of builders.
He
we're
said
a country of
it's
doers.
one,
We're a
but
country
here's
of
another screw up.
explorers. But we increasingly have a federal
Can we put up a poll?
administration.
Is
that
this
makes
the
it
best
harder
debate
to
performance we've
develop
ever
our
seen in our
resources,
lifetime?
Makes it harder to build
Is it me?
things and wants to throw people in jail for not doing everything exactly as Kamala Harris says.
And that's hard to do.
I mean, it's definitely one of the best I've seen. That's for sure.
I remember the Clinton debates, but I hear he was great.
With Tim Walz.
He was very
get out of
charming.
this
I hear
idea
that,
of
yeah.
housing as a commodity, but the thing that has most turned housing into a commodity is giving
also
it
against
away
George
to
H.W.
millions
Bush and
upon
Dole.
millions of people who have no legal right to be here.
What are the federal regulations? I deal with this as a governor.
You can very quickly reply.
I'm sorry.
Beast mode.
I get this as a governor.
He's doing the same thing that JD did to him.
Don't ask a question you don't know the answer to because JD's going to have an answer.
Many of them are state. I don't know which ones are federal, but I think whenever we talk regulations, people think they can get rid of them.
Watch, they're going to try and move on, and JD's going to say, well, he did ask me a question. Watch, that's what's going to happen if they try and move on.
Sure that it's fireproof and those types of things. So which are the regulations? Because the vice president's not responsible for those. Congress writes those.
Not my job.
Governor, thank you. Gentlemen, we have a lot to get to. You're passionate about the housing crisis, I can tell. But Nora?
Thank you. One of the top problems
Thank you. I don't
facing
like you.
Americans is the high cost.
I'm telling you, there's tension between these two.
Like wet
The
cardboard.
last presidential debate, former President Trump was
I'll
asked
tell you what,
about
though, if my lady
replacing
looked at me with the
Affordable
hatred she
Care
has for
Act.
Mrs. Pink,
In
I'd be
response,
harder
he
than a whale's
said,
tooth.
I have the concepts of a plan. Since then, Senator, you've talked about changing how
she's watching,
chronically
though.
ill
Maybe you'll get it.
Americans get health insurance. Can you explain how that would work? And can you guarantee that Americans with pre-existing conditions won't pay more? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Oh, geez.
Well, of course, we're going to cover Americans with pre-existing conditions. In fact, a lot of my family members have gotten health care.
Perfect.
I believe members of my family actually got private health insurance, at least for the first time, switched off of Medicaid onto private insurance for the first time under Donald Trump's leadership. And I think that a lot of people have criticized
Which is great
this
because
concept
1/3 of all
plan
doctors
remark.
don't even accept
It's very
Medicare, I believe. I don't know if that was a
common
Florida
sense. I think
stat or a
Tim Walz
national
knows for 12 years
stat,
in
but a huge
Congress,
percentage of
you're not
doctors
gonna
don't accept
propose a
Medicare and Medicaid at this
900-page
point.
bill standing on a debate stage. It would bore
Mission
everybody
Control,
to
bring that
tears,
up.
and it wouldn't actually mean anything because part of this is the give and take of bipartisan negotiation. Now, when Donald Trump was actually president, and again, he has a record to be proud of, prescription drugs fell in 2018 for the first time in a very long time. Under Kamala Harris's leadership, prescription drugs are up about 7%.
I can confirm.
It's like Walz is writing down all of Vance's ideas and plans so he could use them in the future if they get into office. I don't know. But he's been writing everything down. Look at him. He's like a goblin just trying to steal all of his thoughts.
also drive down costs.
Not now.
And we talked about, the reinsurance regulations is what I was talking about. Look, Donald Trump has said that if we allow states to experiment a little bit on how to cover both the chronically ill but the non-chronically ill, it's
Or maybe he's looking off of notes or something, but he's writing shit down as well.
President of the United States. And I think you can make a really good argument that it salvaged Obamacare, which was doing disastrously until Donald Trump came along. And I think this is an important point about President Trump. Of course, you don't have to agree with everything that President Trump has ever said or ever done. But when Obamacare was crushing
J.D.
under
Vance
the weight
is
of
the
its own
14-ounce boxing glove.
and healthcare
You
costs,
think it helps
Donald
you.
Trump
It just
could
allows you to take
destroy
more
the
blunt
program.
brain
Instead,
trauma without
he
getting cut in the
worked
face.
a bipartisan way to ensure that Americans had access to affordable care. It's not perfect, of course, and there's so much more that we can do, but I think that Donald Trump has
Tim
earned
Walz,
the
you
right
think there's
to
10 of
put
them.
in place some better health care policies. He's earned it because he did it successfully the first time.
Governor?
All right, here's where being an old guy gives you some history. I was there at the creation
you are
of
history.
the ACA.
You were there at Tiananmen Square, too, and
in
Afghanistan.
Is I come from a major healthcare state, home of the Mayo Clinic, home to Medical Alley. 3M, Medtronic, all of those. We understand healthcare. It's why
did
we're
Mayo
ranked
expand to
first on
Arizona?
affordability
I know,
and
because I got my
accessibility
surgery
and
there.
Quality of healthcare. And so what I know is under Kamala Harris, more people are covered than they have before. And those of you listening, this is critical to you. Now, Donald Trump all
Wait, I
of a
thought she
sudden
was vice
wants
president
you.
and it's not
Go
her
back
record.
and remember this. He ran on the first thing he was going to do on day one was to repeal Obamacare. On day one, he tried to sign an executive order to repeal the ACA. He signed on to a lawsuit to repeal the ACA, but lost at the Supreme Court.
And the end result was more affordable health care for people and actually for businesses. More businesses. Now, that would be an interesting stat. How many more businesses in the first 3 years of Donald Trump started providing health insurance, small businesses, to their employees? Guarantee you it's very high. Because my accountant said he had never seen the amount of hiring and the amount of benefits being created, ingrained into the company as those first 3 years. We did.
Kamala Harris negotiated drug prices for the first time with Medicare. We have 10 drugs that will come online, the most common ones that'll be there. But look, this issue, and when Donald Trump said, I've got a concept of a plan, it cracked me up as a fourth grade teacher because my kids would
Teach
have
your
never
drink,
given
but
that.
I'm out.
I'm out.
Senator Vance just explained might be worse than a concept because what he explained is pre-Obamacare. And I'll make this as simple as possible because
Pre-Obamacare was
I have
great.
done this for a long time. What they're saying is, if you're
Bring up the
healthy,
stats on
why should you
Obamacare,
be
the
paying
insurance
more?
premiums, and what
So
those
they're
rates
gonna
were.
do is let
Premiums and
insurance
deductibles,
companies
how high they went.
Pick who they insure, because guess what happens? You pay your premium, it's not much. They figure they're not going to have to pay out to you. But those of you a little older, gray, got cancer, you're going to get kicked out of it. That's why the system
you'll
didn't
have to
work.
pay a little bit more
Kamala
because you're going to
Harris
need a
will
little bit
protect
more.
and
That's
enhance
insurance. You just
the
described
ACA.
socialism.
It's the same reason life insurance is cheaper if you get it when you're young.
You would protect people with pre-existing conditions or laid out that plan.
Well, look, we currently have laws and regulations in place right now that protect people with pre-existing conditions. We want to keep those regulations in place, but we also want to make the health insurance marketplace function a little bit better. Now, what Governor
Obamacare
Walz just
doubled
said
the cost
is
of individual
actually
health
not
insurance.
true. A lot of
Doubled.
what happened and the reason that Obamacare was crushing under its own weight is that a lot of young and healthy people were leaving the exchanges.
Exactly.
Donald Trump actually helped
And have them put all
address
this
that
in a
problem,
list at the end
and
so we
he
can go
did
through all
so
of
in
them.
a way that preserved people's access to coverage who had pre-existing conditions. But again, something that these guys
We already had
do
those
is
risk
they
pools.
make a lot of claims about if Donald Trump becomes president, all of these terrible consequences are going to ensue. But in reality,
Yes, that's what I
Donald
do.
Trump was president. Inflation was low.
I do that.
Take-home pay was higher.
Yeah, that's true. Being a high school drama teacher. Oh boy.
And would have collapsed absent his leadership. He did his job, which is govern in a bipartisan way and get results, not just complain about problems, but actually solve them.
1/3
Governor,
primary
did
care
enrollment
doctors won't
under
take
the
new
Affordable
patients on
Care Act go
Medicaid
up
confirmed.
under the Trump administration?
It's higher now that we've seen it go up. Look, people are using it. The system works.
It's higher now
the
that
question about
you've
this with
been in
young people,
power.
whatever, that's the individual mandate piece of this. And Republicans fought tooth and nail saying, well, Americans should be free to do this. Well, then
So
what
you
happens
think the
is
individual mandate's a good idea?
you shrink. I think the idea of making sure the risk pool is broad enough to cover everyone, that's the only way insurance works. When it
They
doesn't,
applied a
it
tax fine to
collapses.
people who
You
didn't
were
get
asking
Obamacare.
Had
free
risk
ACA,
pools. They
where we get
already
people
did
out.
that.
Look, people know that they need to be on health care. People expect it to be there.
Vance is the master of Jim from The Office. Someone bring up that, bring up a clip of that. He just looks
in the market.
He does. He's giving a little side eye.
Be able to afford it, get there, and we make sure then when you get sick and old, it's there for you. Because I heard people say, "Well, I don't want to buy into Medicare." Good luck buying health care.
Really curious to see the post-debate roundup. There's no way for them to spin this.
Did that. The way she made everything better was negotiating those 10 drugs on Medicare for the first time in American history.
Thank you. Margaret,
Can I address that?
I apologize. We're out of time. We have a number of
And
subjects
he's losing
to discuss.
By the way, and Vance is really clever going like, I'm sorry, go ahead. He's letting everyone know that he's the cock of the walk, baby.
Child care crisis.
I'll be
in
on the
this
next
country,
question.
and the United
Yes, Ms.
States
Pink,
is
quick
one of
question.
the
Why do you have
very
such
few
sad eyes?
developed countries in the world without a national paid leave program for new parents. Governor Walz, you've said that if Democrats win both the White House and Congress, this is a day one priority for you. How long should employers be required to pay workers while they are home taking care of their newborns? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, that's negotiable, and that's what Congress worked. But here's what the deal is. Americans sitting out there right now, you may work for a big company. Look, we're home in Minnesota to some of the largest Fortune 500 companies. Kamala Harris knows that in California. Those companies provide paid family and medical leave. One is, I think they're moral and they think it's a good thing, but it also keeps their employees healthy. We in Minnesota passed a paid family and medical leave. You have a child, and I had to go back to work 5 days after my kids were born. This allows you to stay home a certain amount of time. What we know is that gets the child off to a better start, the family works better, we stay in their employers, we get more consistency in that.
3 months.
So Kamala Harris has made it a priority. We implemented it in Minnesota and we see growth. That's how you become a pro-business
Yeah, but here's the problem. Let me just explain this really quickly. They want to apply it to all
issue.
companies. And I can tell you this, it's not a policy that's been enshrined into law in Texas, but we have given women significant amounts of time off, and men here get 2 weeks off when they have a new child. As a matter of fact, but you didn't take all of it. We've done that just as a way to try and help out. You say that we have to give people 2-3 months off. Guess what's going to happen? People are going to hire less women. Now you have a real wage gap problem.
He's willing to give those
And men, sorry, go back to work.
to the wealthiest. He's willing to say, bust those unions up, do whatever. What we're saying is the economy works best when it works for all of us. And so a paid family medical leave program, and I will tell you, go to the families or go to the businesses and ask them. As far as child care on this, you have to take it at both the supply and the demand side.
Good point.
You can't expect the most important people in our lives to take either our children or our parents to get paid the least amount of money. And we have to make it
Well, people need to leave now because
to
your entire party created a dual income household necessity, to be clear.
We were able to do it in Minnesota, and I'm still telling you this. We were listed as the best state. We're still in crisis on this. A federal program of paid family medical leave and help with this will enhance our workforce, enhance our families, and make it easier to have the children that you want.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, do you support a national paid leave program? And if so, for how long should employers
It's a trick
be
question. Let's see how he navigates
to
this.
pay their employees while they are home taking care of their newborn? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, first of all, Margaret, a number of my Republican colleagues and some Democrats, too, have worked on this issue. And I think there is a bipartisan solution here because a lot of us care about this issue. I mean, look, I speak from this very personally because I'm married
He's forcing
to a
Walz
beautiful
to nod
woman
his head
who's
yes.
an incredible
More
mother
than
to
Walz
our
should
3
be.
beautiful kids, but is also a very, very brilliant
Walz is like, I'm just gonna join you. I'm gonna come over to your side. I like what you're saying.
extraordinary.
I'm writing all of it down as well. I'm very interested in what you have to say.
To paid family leave because she worked for a bigger company, but the cultural pressure on young families and especially young women, I think makes it really hard for people to choose the family model they want. A lot of young women would like to go back to work immediately. Some would like to spend a little time home with the kids. Some would like to spend longer at home with the kids. We should have a family care model that makes choice possible. And I think this is a very important substantive difference between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris's approach. I mean, look, if you look at the federal programs that we have that support paid family leave right now, the Community Development Block Grant, and there's another block grant program that spends a lot of money from the federal government. These programs only go to one kind of child care model. Let's say you'd like your church maybe to help you out with child care. Maybe you live in a rural area or an urban area and you like to get together with families in your neighborhood to provide child care in the way that makes the most sense. You don't get access to any of these federal monies. We want to promote choice in how we deliver family care and how we promote child care because, look, It is unacceptable. And, of course, Tim and I have been on the campaign trail a lot the past 7 or 8 weeks.
This is the one thing the media is going to fact check him on and say he didn't give a specific plan.
People who feel like
but neither did Tim Walz.
Options, like they're choosing between going to work or taking care for their kids. That is an incredible burden to put on American families. We're the only country that does it. I think we could do a heck of a lot better.
Senator, thank you.
I would say that was his weakest answer of the night.
Vance,
but still, light years. I mean, he still had Tim Walz agreeing with him.
The Federal Reserve says parents will spend nearly as much on child care as they do on housing each month. So I want to get your thoughts on this. President
the answers
Trump
in the question.
Recently said,
be a single income household if you can.
Talked about as being expensive.
There you go.
It's relatively speaking,
but they don't even consider that an option.
Expensive compared to the kinds of numbers we'll be taking in. Is President Trump committed to the $5,000 per child tax credit that you have described? You have 1 minute.
Well, what President Trump said, Margaret, I just want to defend my running mate here a little bit, is that we're going to be taking in a lot of money by penalizing companies for shipping jobs overseas and penalizing countries who employ slave laborers and then ship their products back into our country and undercut the wages of American workers. It's the heart of the Donald Trump economic plan. Cut taxes for American workers and American families. Cut taxes for businesses that are hiring and building companies in the United States of America, but penalize companies and countries that are shipping jobs overseas. That's the heart of the economic proposal. And I think what President Trump is saying is that when we bring in this additional revenue with higher economic growth, we're going to be able to provide paid family leave, child care options that are viable and workable for a lot of American families.
Can you clarify how that will...
He looks just as lost as Joe Biden. I don't actually know.
Child care shortages, we just don't have enough resources going into the multiple people who could be providing family care options. And we're going to have to, unfortunately, look, we're going to have to spend more money. We're going to have to induce more people to want to provide child care options for American families, because the reason it's so expensive right now is because you've got way too few people providing this very essential service.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Walz, your ticket also has some child care tax credit proposals.
Minnesota lost $106 million in child care fraud in 2019.
For newborns
Who did?
and $3,000 credit for children over the age of 6, as your campaign has promised. Is that realistic?
Well, if these members of Congress are listening to anybody, I can tell you, and this is the biggest issue. Everybody listening tonight knows. I mean, I'm sure they were shocked to hear it's not that expensive. And let's be clear, whether it's $5,000 or $6,000, that pays you about 3 or 4 months. Let's be clear of where we're at on this. It's because we got out of an imbalance on this. We thought we were going to get by not paying people. I don't think Senator Vance and I are that far apart. I'm not opposed to what he's talking about on options. We've done scholarships types of things. I think we need to be open to making the case. But the issue here is, the question you asked is, you're not going to pay for it with these tariffs. That's just adding another $4,000 on the family and taking less.
What?
So not only do they not get the money,
Tim Walz not answering a question directly.
$4,000 in the hole. That's Wharton School. That's his alma mater. And so I think the issue here is,
the alma mater you cited as supporting your economic plan until they said,
sure, they'll talk about taxes sometime, but they will lead with child care and they will lead with housing, because we know the problem is, especially in a state like Minnesota, we need more workers because our economy's growing, but we need the workforce.
Governor,
did you say childcare is not very expensive?
Let's talk about the state of democracy, the top issue for Americans after the economy
$15
and
off.
inflation.
VP debate promo
after the
code.
2020 election, President Trump's campaign and others filed 62 lawsuits contesting the results. Judges, including those appointed by President Trump and other Republican presidents, looked at the evidence and said there was no widespread
bring up that in a fact check. They didn't even look at the evidence. Bring up the amount of cases. I believe it was out of the 60. Was it 30 something or 40 that didn't even look at the evidence?
The 2020 election.
Have that in the fact check. Again, we'll have this at the end of the VP debate. Use the promo code VP debate. There's $15 off Mug Club. You'll see us 10 a.m. every weekday morning if you're in Mug Club. We can't do it without you.
Or you're gay.
Don't forget. And would have asked the states to submit alternative electors. That has been called unconstitutional and illegal. Would you again seek to challenge this year's election results, even if every governor certifies the results? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, Nora, first of all, I think that we're focused on the future. We need to figure out how to solve the inflation crisis caused by Kamala Harris's policies, make housing affordable, make groceries affordable, and that's what we're focused on. But I want to answer your question because you did ask it. Look, what President Trump has said is that there were problems in 2020, and my own belief is that we should fight about those issues, debate those issues peacefully in the public square, and that's all I've said, and that's all that Donald Trump has said. Remember, he said that on January the 6th, the protesters ought to protest peacefully. And on January the 20th, what happened? Joe Biden became the president. Donald Trump left the White House. And now, of course, unfortunately, we have all of the negative policies that have come from the Harris-Biden administration. I believe that we actually do have a threat to democracy in this country, but unfortunately, it's not the threat to
Walz
democracy
can't find his
that
talking
Kamala
points.
Harris
Look, he's looked
and
down
Tim
for way
Walz
too
want to
long.
talk about. It is the threat of censorship. It's Americans casting aside.
He's going to walk Tim Walz right into this. We have the
friendships,
clip of Tim Walz. Let's have it at the end of him saying that the
big
First Amendment doesn't cover your right to
technology
hate
companies
speak.
their fellow citizens, and it's Kamala Harris saying that rather than debate and persuade her fellow Americans, she'd like to censor people who engage in misinformation. I think that is a much bigger threat to democracy than anything that we've seen in this country in the last 4 years, in the last 40 years.
He knows Tim
Now, I'm
Walz's
really proud,
position.
Especially given
He's
that I was
boxing him in.
raised by
Either
two
Tim Walz is going to have to reiterate his position where he's pro-censorship, or if he walks away from it, then J.D. Vance is going to say, but why did you say, and bring it back up. Watch. It's going to be one of those two. I guarantee it.
Me and Donald Trump on every
If they can
issue.
go back and forth.
We don't have to agree on every issue, but we're united behind a basic American First Amendment principle that we ought to debate our differences. We ought to argue about them. We ought to try to persuade our fellow Americans. Kamala Harris is engaged in censorship at an industrial scale. She did it during COVID. She's done it over a number of other issues, and that to me is a much bigger threat to democracy than what Donald
32
Trump
cases
said
heard on merits out of
when he said
92
that
filed.
protesters should
24 of
peacefully protest on
32
January
won
6th.
by Donald Trump.
Well, I've enjoyed
You've
today's
never heard
debate.
that
I think
before,
there was a
I'm
lot of
pretty sure.
commonality here, and I'm sympathetic to misspeaking on things, and I think I might have with the senator. But
me too, man.
There's one though that this one is troubling to me, and I say that because I think we need to tell the story. Donald Trump refused to acknowledge
That's why he looked
this.
down
And
at
the
your
fact
talking points for
is
so
that
long.
I don't think we can be the frog in the pot and let the boiling water go up. He was very clear. I mean, he
Does it go
lost
up?
this election, and he
boils.
said he didn't. 140 police officers were beaten at the Capitol that day, some with the American flag, several later died. And it wasn't just in there. In Minnesota, a group gathered on the state
More
Capitol
citizens were
grounds
beaten
St.
in one
Paul
city in your
and
state
said,
on
"We're
Black Lives
marching
Matter
to the
rights.
governor's
Citizens.
residence, and there may be casualties." The only person there was my son and his dog, who was rushed out crying by state police. That issue, and Mike Pence standing there as they were chanting, "Hang Mike Pence." Mike Pence made the
Fact
right
check.
decision.
Bring up the
So,
the noose of the
Senator,
Mike
it
Pence that was about 3 feet
adjudicated
tall.
over
Wouldn't
and
even
over
work for a pygmy.
I worked with
We
kids
tried.
long enough to know, and I said as a football coach, sometimes you really want to win, but the democracy is bigger than winning an election. You shake hands, and then you try and do everything you can to help the other
Is
side.
that what Obama
win.
did?
That's what was
Good
at
point.
stake here.
Yeah,
Now,
but,
the thing
but
I'm
you want
most
to
concerned
silence
about is
people who disagree with you. You've said
the
so.
idea that imprisoning your political opponents, already laying the groundwork.
One person
for
has
people
done that.
Not accepting
Joe
this.
Biden or
And
Kamala
a
Harris.
president's words matter.
Donald Trump let Hillary
President's
walk.
words matter. People hear that. So I think this issue of settling our differences at the ballot box, shaking hands when we lose, being honest about it,
Get ready
but
to
to
shake
deny
hands.
what happened on January 6th, the first time in American history
That lady was 4 foot tall.
that a president or anyone tried to overturn a fair election and the peaceful transfer of power.
No, he
And here we are.
You did it in
4 years later
2016.
in the
You,
same boat.
Amy
I will
Klobuchar,
tell you
Elizabeth
this,
Warren,
that when
Jimmy
this is
Carter,
over,
because
we
of
need to
Russia,
shake
which was
hands
fabricated.
this election,
2016.
And the winner needs to be the winner. This has got to stop. It's tearing our country apart.
Margaret?
Answer. No, answer,
Senator Vance,
JD.
did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, well, look, Tim, first of all, it's really rich for Democratic leaders to say that Donald Trump is a unique threat to democracy when he peacefully gave over power on January the 20th, as we have done for 250 years in this country. We are going to shake hands after this debate and after this election. And of course, I hope that we win, and I think we're going to win. But if Tim Walz is the next vice president, he'll have my prayers, he'll have my best wishes, and he'll have my help whenever he wants it.
So much better.
But we have to remember that for years in this country, Democrats protested the results of elections. Hillary Clinton in 2016 said that Donald Trump had the election stolen by Vladimir Putin because the Russians bought like $500,000 worth of Facebook ads. This has been going on for a long time. And if we want to say that we need to respect the results of the election, I'm on board. But if we want to say
joy in
that
his
Tim
face.
Walz is saying that this is just a problem that Republicans have had, I don't buy that.
Governor.
January 6th was not Facebook ads. And I think a revisionist history on this. Look, I don't understand how we got to this point. But the issue was
BLM.
that happened.
It was the beginning.
Donald Trump can do it. And all of us say there's no place
I believe
for
it was a
this.
month
It
before,
has
2 months before, they
massive
burned down a
repercussions.
church outside of the White
This
House, and
idea
they
that
tried
there's
to
censorship
storm the White House
Revising
gates.
history.
Threatening to kill someone, threatening to do something. That's not censorship. Censorship is book banning. We've seen that. We've seen that brought up.
Porno books.
I just
Bring
think
up fact check to the list. They
everyone
banned To Kill a
tonight,
Mockingbird and
I'm gonna
Adventures of Huckleberry Finn.
Vance,
Republicans
I think
want to
this is the
ban
conversation they
pedophile
wanted to
pornography.
hear. And I think there's a lot of agreement. This is
We'll
one
have
that
it.
we are miles
Really
apart
big fact check at the end of this.
This was a threat to our democracy in a way that we had not seen. And it manifested itself because of Donald Trump's inability to say. He is still saying he didn't lose the election. I would just ask that. Did he lose the 2020
So,
election?
Stacey Abrams.
Tim, I'm focused on the future. Did Kamala Harris censor Americans from speaking their mind in the wake of the 2020 COVID situation?
That is a damning non-answer.
It's a damning non-answer for you to not talk about censorship. Obviously, Donald Trump
trying
and I
to get
think
into
there
the
were problems in
censorship
2020. We've talked about it. I'm happy to talk about it further. But you guys attack us for not believing in democracy. The most sacred right under the United States democracy is the First Amendment. You yourself have said there's no First Amendment right to misinformation.
He just agreed. He just fucking agreed with him.
And big tech to silence people from speaking their minds. That is a threat to democracy that will long outlive this present political moment. I would like Democrats and Republicans to both reject censorship. Let's persuade one another. Let's argue about ideas, and then let's come together afterwards.
You can't yell fire in a crowded theater.
Oh,
shit. That's the test. That's
the most.
Supreme Court
He has
test.
2016 talking points.
Crowded theater. You guys wanted to kick people off of Facebook for saying that toddlers shouldn't
Senator,
wear
the governor
masks.
does
That's
have the
not
floor.
Fire in a crowded theater.
Just
That
let them
is
go at it.
criticizing
Don't
the
interrupt
policies
them.
of the government, which is the right of every American.
Senator, the governor does have the floor for 1 minute to respond to you.
Yeah. Well, I don't run Facebook. What I do know is,
the governor does.
Candidate out there who refused, and now again, and this I'm pretty shocked by this.
man.
He lost the election. This is not a debate. It's not. It's not anything anywhere other than.
Let me be really
in
clear.
Donald Trump's world.
You claim he
Because
lost
look,
the election, and he was
Mike
deplatformed by the
made that
exact
decision
same companies.
to certify that
Facebook at that
election,
point, Twitter,
that's why Mike
YouTube,
Pence
Google,
isn't on this
Apple,
stage.
all these places
What I'm concerned
that you
about
demanded
is, where is
deplatform
the
political opposition.
firewall
Can we be more
with
clear about
Donald
that?
Trump?
We've been fighting against this
Where
since,
is
by
the
the way,
firewall?
2011.
If
You can
he
see us
knows,
be demonetized back in 2016, the Vox apocalypse. We know all about
taking an
censorship. That's
election,
why we're on Rumble. If you're
and
watching on
Vice
YouTube, head on over to Rumble.
President's not gonna
It is a
stand
matter
up.
of
We're asking you,
policy
America,
that has
will
been
you stand up?
that has been implemented through systemic pressure applied from the Democrat Party. Mark Zuckerberg admitted it. Elon Musk, now that he has Twitter, has admitted it. YouTube admitted it to us. We've provided you with the receipts. And they've tried to do it to Rumble. And CEO Chris Pavlovsky of Rumble has told you and provided receipts. At every turn, they want to silence voices of dissent.
Time is up. Thank you, gentlemen. We will be right back with both of our candidates. The CBS News vice presidential debate continues.
All right, really quickly, we're going to be back in just 2 minutes. I'm going to make sure that we have this live fact check here at the end of this, kind of like an ombudsman, because boy, has this been a night. It's been a doozy. I'd love to see the results of that poll. I think this is the best debate performance I've ever seen from someone on either side of the aisle, from J.D. Vance. Before we come right back, right now we do have, because we were asked who would be the best press secretary for Donald Trump. The answer has come back time and time again. You can also watch him on Mug Club weekdays at 5 p.m. Eastern. Nick DiPaolo. Nick DiPaolo, and so I present to you the parallel universe in which Nick DiPaolo is the White House press secretary. We'll be right back with a fact check.
All right, I will be right back. We got about 2 minutes for this intermission. Yeah, okay. Be back in a couple. Go get a drink, go to the bathroom, do what you gotta do.
this country, and one where our politics can be better than it is. And I have to tell you, that better than it is the sense of optimism that there can be an opportunity economy that works for everyone, not just to get by, but to get ahead. And the idea that freedom really means something. Not the freedom of government to be in your bedroom or exam room, but the freedom for you to make choices about yourself. Now, look, we all know who Donald Trump is. He's told us, and as Maya Angelou said, believe him when he told you that. His first inaugural address talked about American carnage, and then he spent 4 years trying to maybe do that. Senator Vance tonight made it clear he will stand with Donald Trump's agenda. He will continue to push down that road. Excuse me. Kamala Harris gives us a different option. Now, I'll have to tell you, I'm going to be careful about the quotes, but there's one that Senator Vance said that does resonate with me. He said, Donald Trump makes the people I care about afraid. A lot of America feels that way. We don't need to be afraid. Franklin Roosevelt was right. All we have to fear is fear itself. Kamala Harris is bringing us a new way forward. Yeah. She's bringing us a politics of joy. In as a horse whisperer. She's bringing real solutions for the middle class, and she's centering you at the heart of that. All the while asking everyone, join this movement, make your voices heard. Let's look for a new day where everybody gets that opportunity and everybody gets a chance to thrive. I humbly ask for your vote on November 5th for Kamala
Unless you're a business owner in Minnesota.
Governor Walz, thank you. Senator Vance, your closing statement.
Well, I want to thank Governor Walz, you folks at CBS, and of course the American people for tuning in this evening. And one of the issues we didn't talk about was energy. And I remember when I was being raised by my grandmother, when she didn't have enough money to turn on the heat some nights because Ohio gets pretty cold at night and because money was often very tight. And I believe, as a person who wants to be your next vice president, that we are a rich and prosperous enough country where every American, whether they're rich or poor, ought to be able to turn on their heat in the middle of a cold winter night. That's gotten more difficult thanks to Kamala Harris's energy policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford a nice meal for your family. That's gotten harder because of Kamala Harris's policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford to buy a house. You ought to be able to live in safe neighborhoods. You ought to not have your communities flooded with fentanyl. And that, too, has gotten harder with because of Kamala Harris's policies. Now, I've been in politics long enough to do what Kamala Harris does when she stands before the American people and says that on day one, she's going to work on all these challenges I just listed. She's been the vice president for 3.5 years. Day one was 1,400 days ago, and her policies have made these problems worse. Now, I believe that we have the most beautiful country in the world. I meet people on the campaign trail who can't afford food, but have the grace and generosity to ask me how I'm doing and to tell me they're praying for my family. What that has taught me is that we have the greatest country, the most beautiful country, the most incredible people anywhere in the world. But they're not going to be able to achieve their full dreams with the broken leadership that we have in Washington. They're not going to be able to live their American dream if we do the same thing that we've been doing for the last 3.5 years. We need change. We need a new direction. We need a president who has already done this once before and did it well. Please vote for Donald Trump. And whether you vote for me or vote for Tim Walz, I just want to say I'm so proud to be doing this, and I'm rooting for you. God bless you, and good night.
Senator Vance, thank you. And thank you both for participating in the only vice presidential debate of this election cycle. I'm Margaret Brennan.
And I'm Nora O'Donnell. And a reminder, there are just 35 days until Election Day. Please get out and vote. And for all of us here at CBS News.
All right, to anybody still watching, I'm going to call it here. You could go over to Steven Crowder's stream if you want to continue watching this. They're going to do a massive fact check on everything that has been discussed and debated here tonight. I will be live for question period tomorrow. So if you are here tonight, I may or may not see you tomorrow. Have a good one. Take it easy.